Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the our budget meeting to order. If you could all please rise and have a moment of silence. Pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Thank you, and I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Vidala.
Thank you, Mr. Olympio. Welcome back, everyone. Okay, so this is our May 23rd budget meeting. Just to review where we left off, the proposed voted budget, which is the number that we worked on with the city, is $90,677,549. So that will be, at the budget hearing, the number that we vote on. The funding sources for that, Chapter 70 this year, we had a healthy increase to just over $35 million, and the anticipated municipal contribution is $55,319,170. So that gets us to the appropriated number. At the last meeting, there were some documents and some additional information that was requested of us. List of paraprofessionals, full-time and part-time, by location and funding source, some of the backup details for the special education budget, a copy of school improvement plans, the information on the Ruth Rappaport donation, the budget spreadsheet in Excel, the budget book in Excel, a list of all the administrative job descriptions, and a list of grants that we currently have. Those documents were emailed out on Friday, May 19th. Some additional information that we have for tonight that were asked for, that we took a little bit of time to compile, was the per pupil expenditure information with and without the out-of-district placement students, a list of the programs in which revenue comes into the district, and the year-end projections for our current FY23 budget. So we're prepared to talk on that tonight as well, and of course answer any questions. And just a reminder to the public that Tuesday, May 30th, a week from tonight, is our public budget hearing, and that is here in the Higgins Library at 6:30. And so just for everyone who's listening at home, the school committee will be voting to approve the appropriated budget of $90,677,549 at the public budget hearing on Tuesday, May 30th at 6:30 p.m. in the Higgins Library. So tonight's an opportunity to answer any questions regarding the most recent budget book and determine if there are any recommended changes to the document that will be presented at the public hearing. So what I'd like to do is just go back one slide to the additional information, and I'd like to turn things over to Mr. Rippin. He has some documents that we just shared with everyone, as well as a little bit of context around these three items that were requested. Mr. Rippin?
Great, thank you very much, Josh. I'll take them in order. So the per pupil expenditure information with and without out-of-district students, and fortunately, with a couple months ago, DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, did publish the fiscal year 2022 end-of-year report information, or at least the per pupil expenditures based on our filing of the fiscal year, which would be the school year 21-22 actual expenses. And I'll give you the short answer and then the longer answer. And the context, right? So when Mr. Hochman asked about what is our per pupil expenditure, and I will say it again, I wasn't being flippant. I said, well, define it. And I said, I define it as what the Department of Education and Secondary Education defines it based on our end-of-year report, which was successfully audited recently. And so, and I had, off the top of my head, which is dangerous, estimated, at least for the current year, about 18,000-ish, all in. For 22, the year that's most recently available, we haven't finished 23 yet, in-district per pupil expenditures is $15,654. Now, to give you some context, in one of the sheets I believe you have, versus the state average is almost $4,000 per pupil higher than what we spend. It's $19,536. And it's across the board, we spend less per pupil in every category. I don't see one category where we're over. It's state average. And then when you factor in out of district, and I want to speak to what defines out of district as far as DESE is concerned, our per pupil expenditure is $16,997. And again, that's like $3,100 less than the state average. State average is $20,110. DESE defines out-of-district pupils in, I'll call, three major categories. What we would expect out-of-district is, which is out-of-district placements for special education, and that is 94.7 FTE. The next largest is charter schools, because technically they're out of district. That's 69.7 FTE. And then choice students, students who have choiced out to other districts, that's another 63 students. Rounding out is two more categories that are smaller in nature, and I think that's in the email that I had shared with you from Rob O'Donnell. I thank Rob O'Donnell and the school finance department headed by Jay Sullivan at DESE. They've been very supportive. 19.9 students are students that are from other districts that are of employees that we offer a waiver, and the other 5.8 are what they call other. I would guess those 5.8 are probably tied to an out-of-district placement, but I don't want to bet my life on that. And so what does this all mean? I guess I'm happy to answer, I can answer questions as we go through each of these or at the end. Again, the trend is that, and I shared this with Josh, generally the gap's getting wider between where we are and where the state average is. But as you can tell when you factor the out of district, and it's not unique to Peabody, when you factor in out of district special ed, tuition and transportation, it drives up the overall per pupil expenditure as an average. That's my presentation on that first bullet.
Thank you. Mr. Hockman?
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if it's easier if we take these one at a time. Yeah. So first of all, Mr. Rippon, I didn't think you were flippant at all.
I know, but
I think you were frank, and that's what I appreciate, because you were working your best to respond to a question that was thrown at you from without notice or without any conversation between the two of us about that subject before, and I was looking for this information to kind of drive a point, but I'd like to go through some of this information with you,
Sure.
if I can, Mr. Chair. So through the chair, using the $16,997 per pupil expenditure for 2022 that we get from DESE for Peabody, it looks like that includes a whole bunch of stuff, right? That includes teachers' salaries, it includes paraprofessionals, it includes administrators, it includes guidance,
yes.
security, all of the things that we as a school district fund, and we look at the total budget and divide it by number of pupils, I imagine, and that's how we get to it. For in-district, I don't really want to get to out-of-district placement right now, and I'm not really interested in, waivers or any of those things. I'm just trying to get a grasp on what we spend per pupil and what that encompasses.
Sure.
I think, although I don't necessarily see it on this chart, I think that also includes transportation expenses that we absorb, maybe some athletic expenses that we absorb. I mean, even though we have user fees for those items.
That's correct.
Those user fees are not necessarily, they're subsidized, right? The student doesn't necessarily pay the actual cost, or the family doesn't pay the actual cost, right? So in that $16,996, $97 rounding up, that encompasses all of those items.
Correct.
Okay. And where I was going with this is, and this shouldn't sound like a surprise to anyone. I've been vocal about this issue since maybe its inception. As I'm looking at what we're spending for students who aren't incurring some of those expenses, that aren't incurring a building, aren't incurring transportation expenses, aren't incurring utilities because they're not in a building, and variety of other expenses. And what I mean by that is, if you bear with me 1 second, is from what I see, and I don't know that I'm seeing this correctly, but someone hopefully can clarify this for me, we're spending $778,000, rounding down, on the Peabody Remote Education Program, PrEP, whatever, I'm not sure what the acronym actually is, but the PrEP, we'll call it.
PrEP.
And when I look at the number of students who are enrolled in the PrEP for 23-24, it's projected that there are 82 students enrolled in the PrEP for the upcoming school and fiscal year. And somewhere in this binder, and I had it last Tuesday, but I can't seem to find it today, out of those 82 students, I think 40 of those students are summer school students. And we're actually only servicing about 42 PrEP students.
I believe that's PLA that you're, those numbers are for the Peabody Learning Academy, not for the virtual school.
Okay, so I see, well, if I can, through Dr. Vidalik, I see on the cover page of our budget book, on the back side of it, gives us the breakdown of projected enrollment per facility, or for a program, for facility. And I see 82, which is a decrease of
Correct,
12 for this academic year. But I know I saw somewhere in here a breakdown of students that, what that actually means in terms, can you direct me to that?
Yes, so there's a little bit of confusion, I think. So the tab number 46 is the PrEP, the virtual school, which is currently listing 82. And that was an estimate when we first did this. Their current enrollment is about 107 right now. The other item that you are looking at, I believe, is tab, is it 11? Tab 11 is the PB Learning Academy, which has about the same number of students listed in the book, which is 85, and 40 of them are summer school students. So the numbers are very similar, but the breakdown is different.
Okay, so you're thank you for correcting me, because that is exactly what I saw, and I confused the two, which takes me away from my argument, because it seemed like we were spending more per pupil on Peabody PrEP students than we were for students that were attending school traditionally, and that seemed to be somehow incongruous for me. But so I'll step back from that, although I will note that we're spending, based upon this budget, $778,000 and change for the $778,261 from what I see on the PrEP, which is a significant amount of money, and so thank you, Mr. Rippon, for providing me with the
My pleasure.
details on the per pupil expenditure. And that was why I asked for that information, because it seems that If that's the appropriate, if that's the number we spend, that's the number we spend, but it seemed odd to me that we were spending as much or more on prep kids, and maybe we're not, because I misread some data. But I would still suggest that $778,000 for our third non-traditional learning program is a significant expense.
I guess if there are no other questions, I'll move on to the second bullet here, which is a list of and this is encapsulated in a memo to you, the committee, that I wrote today, the 3-pager, but I'll go through it in detail. It's a list of programs where revenue comes into the district, and working with Dr. Vidala, he believed these 5 programs were the ones that you had a real interest in, and so that's what you have. I can stand corrected, but these are the 5 I'm prepared to discuss. And they're in order. Transportation, facilities usage, athletics, integrated preschool, and the vocational program that has 6 programs, 3 of which are revenue generating or have the capacity to be revenue generating. Starting with transportation, and this is for our yellow bus transportation that we have with Healy Bus. We have generated, or we have received, $365,528, and at this point, we don't anticipate any further collection of revenue for the balance of the year. Expenses will be roughly $365,528 because to balance the budget, the operating budget, which is the last bullet here in my presentation, we need because we spend $1.5 million roughly to Healy Bus for running 24 buses in district. Fees for the school year are for this year, but were $225 for a one-way pass and $325 for a round-trip pass with a family cap of twice that amount, or $450 and $650 respectively. As you know, and I feel we actually got a heck of a good deal relative to the market, it still represented a double-digit increase in our bus fee. Not bus fee, but the money we pay to the contractor for next year. And therefore, I'm recommending, because I heard that we can still get the committee to approve fees for next year, raising these fees to $250 and $375 for one-way and round trip with a cap of $500 and $750. Just to provide relief to the operating budget. Otherwise, the increase for Healy is going to be, it's going to be about a $200,000 driver, pardon the pun, on a $1.5 million base. Just saying. Facilities usage. Revenue here, we've gotten $127,848. We expect it'll come in close to $150,000. Expenses charged are expected to be custodial overtime, and I'll touch on that in the next bullet. Directly related to the facility use billed for, along with capital expenses to maintain the facilities being used. Highlights, which I think you're aware of and I'm proud of, in my short time here, utilizing this revolving account, are new public announcement systems at the center and the South Elementary schools, which those were both health and safety issues, along with supplementing the monies that we're getting from both the CPA fund and the recreation revolving to pay for the playground at the McCarthy Elementary School. Fees vary based on the type of rental and the organization rented to. At this point, I don't recommend fee changes at this time. I need to know more about it. In my past experience, it's a long, arduous process because of the varied stakeholders that are impacted.
Mr. Rippon, just to add, some of the other things that we've been able to use this account for were the door locks, bathroom upgrades, those things that we did at the high school this year. That was paid out of the facilities usage account, as well as the recent water fountains, the water filtration systems that we did at the bottle filling stations at the high school. Those were also paid for out of this account. So those are the types of expenses that we use from the facilities usage account. So our rentals were able to make those building improvements that are needed in our schools.
Thank you for the additional information. Athletics. Athletics has received $164,798. That includes the spring season. My expectation is if there's revenue, it's not going to be a lot to talk about. Expenses charged here are home game officials, scorekeepers, and the like, along with police detail expenses and other athletic supplies and equipment, including uniforms as needed. What's also been funded out of this is the dugout fencing, along with the public announcement system at the stadium, the huddle program, and the weight room equipment and renovation. The current fee for athletics is $175 a sport to a $350 cap for families, and I don't recommend adjusting that fee at this time. Integrated preschool. Integrated preschool, which is housed at the McCarthy School, generated $214,373. Again, at this point, given how fees are billed, the final bill would have been in March. So the expectation, and Susie Winter does a heck of a good job. I must say, I'm here as a backstop, but I haven't had to do much backstopping. So I don't anticipate any additional revenue to speak of. Expenses charged against this revenue are paraprofessional experiences, the related benefits were applicable, along with instructional supplies and materials and investment in equipment. There's some unique equipment, whether it's back in it's still like pretend stove, all that good stuff. Fees for the current year are $2,875 for a 5-day, half-day program, and $5,500 for a full-day program, 5 days. Just so you know, a 5-day program is 2.5 hours a day, 8:30 to 11, and a full day is a 6-hour program, 8:30 to 2:30. Market rate, and I'm not saying market rate compared to KinderCare or Little Sprouts, I'm saying market rate compared to other public school systems is roughly $7 per contact hour. We're far from that in the full-day program. We're in at least the same area code with a half-day. And so, let me first say we have 16 students that are in full-day program across 2 sections, and the other 56 rather, are across 7 sections, and the total is 9 sections. I would recommend increasing the fees to $3,000 for a half-day and $7,000 for a full day. I leave that to you, but again, this additional amount of money would allow us to both further invest in the preschool program and provide a little bit of relief for the operating budget. Lastly, and probably the most complex, although I did, is the vocational program at the Peabody Veterans Memorial High School. it's a wonderful, well, programs, you know, it's career and technical exploration. There are 6 programs, and I'll talk first to the 3 that generally don't generate revenue, at least currently. That is criminal justice, I guess what I would call engineering or technology, and medical assisting. Great programs, provides great skills for students to go right into the workforce, but generally those aren't expected to generate revenue. The 3 that are, in various capacities, in the order I've listed them, is the early childhood, otherwise known as Little Tanners, cosmetology, and culinary, which is segregated in the Tanner Cafe for students, catering for the district, and melting pot for adults. In sum, these programs combined have generated 56,341. In confirming with Shannon, I threw a dart out there. She matched my dart independently. Was we would hit 70,000. I think mostly in Little Tanners. I don't think there's much of any revenue due to, I think, things happening in cosmetology, and I'll speak to the culinary. A lot of things happening there. The expenses charged to these programs, as well as the other 3 programs, are paid for in excess of the operating budget. And I think, as you all know, the operating budget, which is tab 12, is awful light. This year is $10,000 for all programs for supplies, and I think you know that doesn't cut it. Okay, so a lot of the expenses are coming out of this. And yeah, it's my expectation that revenue will increase for next year as we have renovated the culinary space, all of it. With the assistance of the Capital Skills Grant, I think that clocked in for this program alone of, you know, in the neighborhood of $250,000. And Shannon Spinoza has done a great job putting that to good use. I want to thank Dan Doucette. I want to thank Jim Hafey as well. A lot of work has gone on, and by the end of the summer, I think, you know, you should stop by. And so, again, my expectation is we'll get into 6 figures at least for counting those 3 programs. Fees vary depending on program, and I look to work with Shannon to review and recommend fee adjustments as necessary at a later date. I look forward to meeting you, and I'm meeting you tonight to discuss these programs in further detail. I don't know if you have any questions at this point, or I should just keep going. I guess I'll keep going. Lastly, and I would argue, lastly, and probably most importantly, because 23 drives 24 in a lot of ways, is my best pass, and I mean I'm both proud and a bit worried. Now I'll speak to both. And I'm open to suggestions for a format, but this is a format I'm used to, and let me sort of walk you through it. The first column basically mirrors the book that you would have had for last year, which is by location, the budget, $83,281,902. Embedded in that budget, because no contracts were settled at the time this budget was built, was a placeholder of $1,200,000 buried in central administration. As it turned out, when all the contracts were settled, it was a bit north of $1.2 million, $1,044,305 north. And those additional dollars, Josh and I met with Mike Gingras and Mary Martin and Mayor, and the agreement was that that money would be allocated back to the operating budget, and it hasn't posted yet, but my expectation is it will. And I put that in central administration just to wet it to the $1.2 million. And so when you revise the budget for that $1,044,305, you're at a revised budget of third column, $84,326,207. Now we go to the fourth column. The fourth column, as of today, is what was both expended and encumbered, $74,298,656. And then I need to jump off that number and project what's going to happen for the rest of the year. And that's where I'm both proud and a bit nervous. I'll tell you why I'm proud, and I'll tell you why I'm nervous. As you see, there's this big honking number in central administration, $12,702,857. And I want to thank Susan Bachnick and our payroll office, because clearly that's a damn precise number. And the reason it's a damn precise number is it's damn precise. She went through every employee that's on the operating budget and projected out remaining payrolls all the way through the summer. And that's what it is. Okay? And if I had nothing going the other way, we'd be talking about a deficit this year. That's why I'm a little nervous. What I do know, and again, it's very preliminary, what I do know and have confidence in are the three other numbers you see there. I know, and in the process of $3 million of out-of-district tuitions that are currently captured in the operating budget are being moved off to circuit breaker. We're getting roughly $3.8 million in circuit breaker funds, and I'm taking $3 million of, and out of necessity, as you can see, and moving it there. Custodial plant, and I think, I know Josh has spoken with the mayor, even though it's all supposed to be on the city side, our budget's been hit for $119,041. The expectation is there's no budget. It's got to come off. So it's going to come off. I think some of that has to do with the rentals and is going to land there. What isn't is going to land at the city, but it's not going to stay here. So I've pulled that out. Transportation of a reduction of $850,000 is in two buckets. The aforementioned Healy that I said we need to take, the 300 and some odd thousand, I put a holder of 350 out, and another 500,000 for out-of-district transportation because circuit breaker's now reimbursing for out-of-district transportation, and we need to pull that money out. So when I do this, and that assumes everything else is either encumbered or it isn't happening, because I've made it clear in a memo or an email that this Friday is it with purchase orders, unless I see it first and approve it. And so we'll call it lockdown, budget lockdown. And so, you get excited at the last column, it's like, oh, there's $1,293,000. Let's party. Not so much. I put a little footnote below. I can tell you insurance is going to be light in this by $600,000 minimum. And so now you're at $693,000. I just didn't want to commingle it with the $12,700,000 because that's in central administration, so I highlighted it here. And then there's special education that isn't encumbered that, may hit. So there's precious little margin in this budget. That's the message I want to deliver. Precious little margin. I believe we're going to be fine, but not by a lot. I've been at this a while, I'm new in Peabody, but I feel good in telling you what I'm telling you. And I guess I've completed covering the items. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rippin. Great report. Mr. Amico?
Thank you so much for all that. If we can just go back, now it's on. If we can go back, essentially there are three parts to this budget, just so we can have it very clear for everyone here and for everyone listening. And we have a regular budget, we have an ESSER budget, and we have grants budget.
Well, ESSER's a grant, but it's a different kind of grant, but yes.
Okay, can we just get the numbers that we have? I have the ESSER budget slightly over 3 million. Do you have an exact amount on that
For this year or next year?
for next year?
The budget is assuming ESSER budget of 2 million. Get you that.
It's this sheet right here. 2,392,446?
That is correct.
Okay. So 2,392,446. And the grants budget that you sent us was $3,628,081.
I think Josh put that together on my behalf because I was running a conference for my state association, but I can only assume that
So
was.
that
was
is a list of the grants for this year.
entitlements.
We don't get the final numbers until July,
So
but those are estimates. We do anticipate they'll be about the same or a little higher for those federal grants.
And for the regular budget, we're looking at the,
90,677,549.
okay. So those are the three essential budgets that we're looking at.
That is correct, because the revenue funds I spoke of, and all revolvers are budgeted and planned to break even.
So I guess my next question is, we have the 90 million plus we have here in our white binder. Then we have an ESSER budget, which is here.
Correct.
Can we get a further breakdown of this here for our next meeting?
Sure. I mean, I did find out from Josh, I think today, that was a request, and certainly I can work on pulling that together.
And I appreciate it. And the reason why I'm asking is, and you mentioned it, you think we're going to be okay for next year, but you do have some reservations, so.
I'm talking this year.
This
You
year,
asked me
yeah,
this year.
For the end of this year, yes.
Okay.
So that makes me a little bit concerned about next year, so I feel as though, that's why I asked for that request to have, and it's all public
Sure.
record. You know, every employee that we pay out here in the public schools, I just want a whole running list position, just so I and the whole group can look at all the positions and what we're paying and.
Sure.
And go from there. But I did have a list here through the chair, and I was hoping that are you able to get us some salaries at this point? I know we
Over and
have job-
above,
I know
over and
we have-
above
we have-
what's in the book?
We have job descriptions, but we don't have all the salaries. And we are missing one job description as well.
Again, if you can, through, and I know Steve Farrell is here. I'm not prepared, not that I don't want to, I'm just not prepared to list individual salaries over and above what's in the book. If there's, there is a roster in the book, but that's tied to the operating budget. I don't have that information at my fingertips for the grants and the ESSER. The job description, again, that'd be through Josh to Steve for whatever job description you feel is missing.
I do have one that's missing, but I was hoping that I could we do have a whole list of admin positions here, and it was requested by Mr. Olympio and then by me to receive all the salaries that accompany those
Hold on.
descriptions.
So when, yeah, I'm just. Admin is 22, hold on.
So,
I mean, I see all
yeah,
the
sure. Mr.
salaries
Rippon,
here.
so to clarify, so some, I believe, are in here in our budget book, but some are not. So that's, so if we don't,
If they're not in the budget book, they're not in the budget.
well, there are some who are not in here, is what I'm saying.
Right,
So
that are in the budget, but there's no description, there,
there's no description.
I'm happy
that's
to
why I made
follow,
that- I
I'm
made
happy
that
to
request.
follow up on that. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the,
Is there something you're specifically looking for?
There are several. I did want a whole list of all of our admin positions and salaries. I feel as though all our teachers and para salaries are in there, so I would like, you know, just a whole list of them.
So
Can I
I'm
just
aware
ask
of
a
your.
question?
Sure.
Just so that I can follow along? I'm sorry, if I may, through the chair. The list that we were emailed of the positions you're talking
Yes.
about, okay, are those all listed in the white budget book? Or is it a mixture of some in this budget book and some in the ESSER? I just want to make sure I'm following the conversation.
That's correct.
okay.
So what was asked for as a document was all of the job descriptions for the administrators. So we created a document that had that information in there. So what you received on Friday, and it had a cover page of all the titles, and it's 70 pages of all the job descriptions. What Mr. Amico asked for yesterday, which we can compile, it's going to take a little bit of time, was every employee paid, which we will get that to you, but it wasn't requested for a job description with a salary next to it. I think they came in as two separate requests. So you have a copy of all the job descriptions. Unless you're missing something, let me know, and if there's something specific, we'll get that to you. But we can work on what you asked for, which was a list of the roughly 1,000 employees and their salaries, which we can get that. It came in yesterday. That wasn't something we were asked for last week, but we can get that to you.
Okay, so I guess for now, I think there is one missing. There isn't a job description for Director of Teaching, Learning, Math, and Science. Unless I have missed it, there's 70-odd pages here, but I've gone through it, and I haven't found that one. If anyone could assist me, I'd appreciate that.
What content here? You said math and?
I'll get to the front page here. So it's the Director of Teaching, Learning, Math, and Science. That one I could not find in here.
I don't want to speak out of turn. Is that person? Yes. Yeah, it's on the page 25A. It's the first position listed.
On 25A,
Yeah. Tab 22. Well, they're all, second page is 25A, I apologize. And it says Director of Teaching and Learning, and that position is budgeted at $68,309, or it's budgeted, it's split between the operating budget and a I believe a non-operating budget.
I don't have it.
So Mr. Amico,
the
to
third
answer your
page?
question on the job description,
Yeah, so
while
the-
we're looking for that.
Yeah.
So there are two positions for Director of Teaching and Learning. One of them oversees humanities, and the other one oversees the STEM field. So with all the grants and all the curriculum adoptions that we have 2 directors for curriculum that are under Dr. Chase. One focuses on humanities, so ELA, social studies, integrated technology, and the other focuses on STEM, which is the science, technology, engineering, mathematics. So the science adoption, the math adoption, all of that is in the STEM world, and the teaching and learning for humanities is that's our HMH adoption, the new GLEAM work that we're doing. So those are 2 positions that are under Dr. Kelly Chase to focus on both sides of the curriculum. So they have similar job descriptions, just different content areas.
Okay, no, okay, so if you could, through the chair, if you could get that to us, I'd appreciate it. Like I said, I just
The
like
job
to-
description, or?
The job description.
Yeah, so that's, the job description's on page 53 of the list. And so one person will be doing these responsibilities in the humanities field, and the other person will be doing these responsibilities in the STEM field.
Oh, okay, so I wasn't aware that it was basically the same job, and it,
Yes, they're basically, we have, multiple principals, we have curriculum directors. One, is reporting to Dr. Chase in humanities, the other's reporting to Dr. Chase in science and mathematics.
all right, so what I can do is I can wait through the chair until we get all the employees' salaries and what I had requested.
I'll work on that tomorrow with the payroll department, now that they've finished compiling all the projected remaining payroll, so.
I yield, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mako. Mr. Hockman?
Thank you. Mr. Rippon, thank you again for this end-of-year projected report. I realize that there's still numbers that are in flux, and I appreciate you cautioning us and being conservative with our expectations. So, if I can, through the chair to you, Mr. Rippon, that last column reflects that there's, based upon the operating budget and projected expenses, we are looking at 1.294, just to round up, million of money left over, and you're expecting $600,000 of that
For
to be,
sure, yeah.
to be utilized in the insurance, health insurance overage. Is that right?
That is correct.
And that health insurance overage is for the fiscal year 22, 23?
Correct.
Okay. And then you're also expecting some obligations to come in with regard to special education.
Correct.
Do you have a ballpark on that? I don't want to pigeonhole you here, but
No, I mean, just today I saw a purchase order for another 20,000.
Okay.
I mean, so,
so if I
say
was
300,000 maybe?
like it, good.
Okay.
So is it then? So let's say we split the baby there and we go to 250
Yep,
and 600,
it's 850.
850 leaves me
444.
good. I'm going to even leave more of a cushion. So is it fair? Is it a conservative expectation that $444,000? We might have $444,000 moving forward into the 23-24 fiscal year from a surplus of 22-23.
Potentially,
Okay.
potentially,
All right.
again, and my expectation is it wouldn't be left to revert. It would, we would either relieve some relieve some operating, not operating, relieve some revolving and/or grants.
Prepay some special education expenses or some.
Potentially,
Yeah, potentially.
that's an option, although,
Yeah.
right, that's, I'm not a fan of that generally, because then it creates an expectation in the subsequent year.
Good. So but we're gonna make you happy then. I'm gonna make a motion that we add a line to the budget in the amount of $400,000 to be used for maintenance in all 10 school buildings. So moved.
Can I ask for clarification on the motion?
Yep, sure, Dr. Bedell.
Is that money to be used this year, or money in addition to the 90 million $677,549.
Thank you for the request, Dr. Vidala. I'd like to see $400,000 included in the 23-24 budget to be used for maintenance in the schools. So however you want to characterize it, whether we're adding it to the 90 million and change number that's before us, or we're prepaying other items that we can and pulling those lines out so that we can spend 400,000 on maintenance. I'm not really particular on the mechanics of it. I just want to see a line in this budget for $400,000 for maintenance of the schools. I'd leave it to your administration and business manager to, figure out how that looks on paper.
So just so I'm clear and the committee, so we have been charged with voting on a budget of $90,677,000. So that's what we can vote on. The items in it, we can move around. So if we're going to add 400,000 to this budget document, then to Mr. Hockman's point, we would remove 400,000 of expenses from this budget somewhere else. So I just want to make sure what the expectation is.
Yes, Dr. Vidala,
Yes.
that's the expectation, and I don't know
Yep.
what the document needs to look like to reflect that.
Sure.
Like I said, there are certain expenses that we can prepay, right? Special education being some of them. There are other expenses that we can prepay. I think some contracts, actually, I think service contracts are items that we're permitted to front load or prepay on June 30th perhaps, and things like that. I'd like to see $400,000 in a line, in an actual line in the budget, so that next year when we look at the budget, we'll see a line funded for $400,000 in maintenance. And however the mechanics of that need to work or are reflected, whether there's a line for prepaids or some other offset, however you, Mr. Rippon, and maybe Mr. Gingras or others who were involved in the budget process wish to do that, that's fine. I would like to just see that there's going to be a line somewhere in this budget for $400,000 for maintenance, so that when we look at the 24-25 budget, there'll be a line in there that'll either reflect level funded or some adjustment to that $400,000, assuming that we're going to vote on now, and I'm making assumptions that facts not in evidence, right? We haven't voted on it yet, so that's just my motion.
I guess through the chair, I have two concerns, and whether it's prepaying tuitions or prepaying anything, that let's assume for argument's sake that there is 400,000 that is left that we could pay something, pick what it is. The base cost still exists, and so you're exacerbating a cliff that we already know we have a $2,400,000 cliff going into 25 because ESSER is budgeted to be fully expended at the end of next year. So you're the committee, but I strongly advise against that unless we're going to get 400,000, increase. So now, if we're asking for 91,077,549, I'm all for it. But otherwise, if we do that, we're positioning ourselves for a deeper hole, in all things being equal.
Thank you, Mr. Rippon. Mr. Hockman?
Yeah, through you to Mr. Rippon, thank you for the caution. I suspect that's, it's good to hear a business manager being cautious, right? That's one of your functions, I would think. I can tell you that even if you gave us an end-of-year projection that zeroed out, I was still going to ask for $400,000 to be put into this budget for maintenance of our buildings. So I'm happy that it seems to be, or at least a real possibility exists that with my request for $400,000 for maintenance, there may not be a cut somewhere else, but I was willing to cut $400,000 out of this $90 million projected budget to fund a maintenance line for that amount. So I can rephrase the motion so that it doesn't deal with prepays or anything like that. I'm just adding, my motion is to have $400,000 put into this budget for a line for maintenance for the 10 school buildings that we use for schools.
On the motion, Ms. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm okay with adding $400,000 to the bottom line of this budget and discussing it with the mayor. Because if we add $400,000 to our budget for maintenance, there should be some type of a reduction on the city side for the maintenance of the schools, because I still haven't quite figured out how it works, but we know that we need work done in the schools, and that the supplies are going to cost money. And we also know, just from your memo here, that the expenses charged for facilities usage is for custodial overtime, and that is used towards items in the current budget. So I think if you could explain it to me so that I can understand the reticence of just adding $400,000 to the bottom line and working that out with the city, with the charge-offs and everything.
I don't have reticence to adding. I just, my understanding from what I've heard from the mayor through the superintendent is it's a zero-sum game. You know, the pie isn't going to get any bigger. It's how we want to slice it. And if that's the case, then I have concern.
May I ask another question? Does any of the money that we charge for custodial overtime, the city pays the custodians, correct, under their budget?
Correct.
Okay. And then the city charges us for their overtime as well?
It appears that way. Again, I've seen in our budget, even though there's no budget, I see in our year-to-date, $119,000 has been expended largely for custodial overtime, presumably, and it makes sense, presumably related to the rental activity. And, you know, in my experience, that would be an offset to the revenue. And I expect that's, you know, a lot of this 119 is going to come off. It has to. There's no budget for it here. And, you know, if it's directly related to an activity where we collect a fee, then it should be offset. If it's, for example, in my experience, I've seen custodians have to stay late sometimes for a school committee meeting. Well, we don't collect any revenue for that. That would reside, and the budget presumably resides on the city side. You know, you have this look that I maybe didn't explain it well, you know.
No, I didn't understand it. You probably
No,
explained
but
it perfectly.
let me try again. No, I want you to understand it's important. There's all kinds of activities that require, you know, an alarm call. Well, we don't get to bill anybody for that.
Right.
That gets charged to them. It should reside, and there should be budget sufficient in the municipal budget, in the city budget. But if we have FKO, you know, and there's overtime related, well, that should be borne off as an expense related to the revenue. Because if FKO didn't rent and pay us money, we wouldn't have that expense. Does that make it, do you understand better?
I do, because actually I have another question when we get into a different topic on that. But, all right, how about this? Since Mr. Hockman, and you made the motion, could we hold this until we can talk to the mayor about the $400,000 bottom line?
Mr. Hockman?
Through you to Ms. Dunn, thank you for the inquiry. I can tell you that I spoke to the mayor earlier today, and I don't believe we're going to be receiving any more funds from the city than is projected in this budget. What I'm saying is my experience, and I think your experience here in the committee, has been that we get a budget presented by superintendents with what they want to have our funds expended towards. And then we go through it, and we have certain wishes that we want. We have perhaps sometimes the same thoughts and ideas about moving the district forward, and sometimes different. And I think Dr. Vidala, in at least my conversations with him, he would like to see a maintenance budget, because I think he sees the value in it, and he sees things that have occurred in the district in the last couple of years that you know, don't sit well with me, and I know they don't sit well with you. And so I guess I'm saying is, if there's a potential surplus, it makes it an easy vote, right? I'm saying even if there's not a potential surplus, I'm still making the motion, because I still want to see $400,000 spent towards maintenance, and then I would ask the administration to go through the budget proposal that they've presented and provide us with some options where we might be able to, you know, retract on some of the expectations that are within that budget. But in either case, I don't want to hear, and I don't blame anybody, right? We're short on custodial staff, we're short on equipment for the custodians, and we're short on tradespeople, but I don't want to hear about no heat in a building. I don't want to hear about toilets not flushing. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to hear about, you know, our supposedly new schools, the Brown and the Carroll, where the air conditioning and the heating system aren't balanced. You know, those are things that we've talked about. We've been together for a long time, and we've been talking about it for a long time. I don't want to hear it. I want to be able to say we're making a priority in our facilities, and if we don't have the resources within the district for whatever reason with personnel, then I want the superintendent and his administration to engage in contracts with vendors who are able to perform those services and provide our teachers and our kids and staff members with the, you know, some basic necessities. I mean, I don't want to hear about mold at the center school. I mean, how did we get to that point? How did we get to the point where we're closing buildings for a year to do repairs because of health issues? So what I'm saying is, for me at least, and you all will vote as you will, for me at least, I'm making that my priority in this budget, that we're going to take care of our buildings, because taking care of our buildings keeps our people healthy, keeps our people happier, and provides an environment for which they can teach and learn, and that's part of what I think we do. So if we have the $400,000 left over, as Mr. Rippon thinks we might, and I'm not holding him to that, I understand his position on this, then great, and we'll have a net zero effect on what's before us in the binder. But if we don't have it, then let's find $400,000 in a $90 million budget and figure it out. And I guess direct response to your question, I'd prefer not to hold it. I'd prefer to vote on this, because I don't think the mayor is going to provide us with an additional $400,000 over and above what the city has already presented as what they believe that they can afford through this process.
Nope, I understand what you're saying. I'll be honest, my concern is I don't want to see the superintendent and staff have to go through the budget and cut things to reach a $400,000 line. I think the $400,000 is a good figure to be looking at for the necessary repairs and maintenance in our buildings. I just don't want to see the budget have to be cut. That's why I was hoping we could see if we could add to it. But if I may ask one other option, when you were speaking, Mr. Rippon, about fees vary based on rental and organization and not recommend fee changes at this time, would that be something we could look at as far as increasing fees to make up some of that $400,000?
I think that is a wise suggestion. I'm not cautious about finances. I'm more cautious about, I'll be blunt, politics, you know, because depending, at least in my experience, I've been at this a while, it can be the third rail, you know.
Oh, take it from us, it's a third rail, don't even worry about that.
Yeah, so, but I think it's good practice. God knows when this was last looked at.
Right.
So I think generally it's good practice. It's just there's political risk, right, because of the kind of stakeholders that avail themselves of school buildings. But I guess I'm willing to take that on. It's just, you know, generally speaking, you get a committee together that represents stakeholders, and you do some benchmarking. I mean, now that we're coming out of COVID and buildings presumably would be utilized more, it is, yes, it's possible, I don't know if for '24, we're going to really be, because you want to give people notice and things. I think this is realistically a fiscal 20, we do the work in '24 for effective 24, 25 school year.
Ms. Dunn?
I don't want to cut off Mrs. Carpenter, but I would like to just add one thing while we're on this topic. When we set our fees, we were also working in conjunction with the Recreation Department on some of the facilities that we had. And Mr. Hockman and I were on that committee. I can't remember what year it was, but it was a long time ago. And our fees, as far as I know, they have not increased at all since that time. We did have a very clear structure where nonprofits and community, we want to encourage use of the schools. We don't want to make it out of anybody's reach. But we also had a very well thought out program on, I will say, on the recreational facilities on the school grounds. And then in the schools themselves, we had the discussion on the rental fees for the buildings and the facilities in the buildings. That one, again, I couldn't tell you the last time we looked at those fees, but I will also say that we have groups that rent our buildings under contract, and we haven't looked at those in a long time either. An example of that is the FKO contract. We haven't looked at that. And we have, to my knowledge, and I would like you to look into that, could you please provide us with a list of the amounts that have been charged and paid over the years? Because I don't think we've increased that, and our costs have gone up. Everyone's costs have gone up. People are going to understand that there needs to be an increase just because it's just part of doing business. So I think that this is definitely something we should look at as far as our rental fees so that we can apply them towards a maintenance line. Because a lot of that money does go toward custodial overtime, but I don't think all of it, it's not 100%, if I'm correct.
No, it wouldn't be. I mean,
Okay.
in theory, and it's how aligned what we charge for custodial overtime versus what is actually paid. But in theory,
Right.
that should match up pretty tightly. It's really the fee for the facility that we would keep and then reinvest
Yeah.
in repairs and maintenance. You are
Exactly.
correct.
So,
Okay.
to my knowledge, that's a very nominal fee. So it's typically $35 to $50 plus whatever the 4 hours for a custodial overtime. So that fee structure is, and on the sheets where people have to fill out to request it, that is very small. And I know we've had times when people have come and we've been able to waive that fee, but not the custodial fee. But it is a very small fee. So that would take quite some time to get to 400,000. But I mean, I'm not suggesting that we charge, a large fee above that. I do think that, the facilities usage is a great place to start. I also worry about cutting $400,000 from teaching and learning and students for something that I do think we need to have a deep discussion about the city's obligation to maintain its buildings. I would hate to see the money come away from the kids to go to something like that.
Right, and I know, for example, the school committee instituted a $50 energy fee. That was when energy costs had risen quite a bit. And we even voted ourselves that we could not waive the $50 fee. We have been able to waive custodial fees to help out groups that are trying to fundraise for specific needs. But that's one example of us trying to offset the costs of energy in the buildings, and we probably should look at that again as well, because again, that's a cost that's gone up. And that's just, I'm going to stop right there because I've taken too much time from everybody else, but
Miko, then Ms. Carpenter.
Thank you, through the chair, to the committee. And I do agree with Mr. Hockman.
microphone.
it's a necessity, 400,000 into maintenance. The reason why some of the buildings are in the shape they're in is because we haven't done that for the last 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years. So if we're going to look to the future to keep these buildings, maintain these buildings, through the chair to Mr. Hockman, he's mentioned that the Carroll School and the Brown School, sometimes we hear that they're new schools. They're 15 and 20 years old or older. So a line item such as a maintenance line is definitely something that I would support. But I also want to get into a little something else, this is how I feel about a budget. There's 90 million in here. It's brought to us. We didn't set up these meetings just to come in and just say, done, approved. It is our purview to go into this budget, to pull stuff out if we want, add stuff out, delete, subtract, and if we get to the 90 million, we get to the 90 million. If we get under it, if we get above it, then we have to do what we have to do. So I'm not coming here to rubber stamp a budget. I don't think anyone is doing. In fact, I just wanted to read off something, if I could. Source, Massachusetts Superintendent Association of Schools. We have a fiduciary responsibility in addition to its roles under the Mass Education Reform Act. The school committee has a fiduciary responsibility that has nothing to do with education governance reform. Elected local officials have fiduciary responsibility to their constituents. That includes a duty of care, duty of loyalty, and the responsibility to ensure district finances are sufficiently transparent so as to protect the public interest. The school committee has a responsibility to act as the best interest of the school district and to protect its integrity and strength. This includes transparency of its finances. So we have a $90 million budget here, and that's great. But again, we have the right to go in here. And if we have to find $400,000 to remove because we have a necessary issue, and I would say maintenance is, then we have the right to do so. If we want to go back in and take 150,000 and put something else in, we have that right. And I have a whole list of things that I'd love to see in this budget that aren't in this budget. So I have that right. We all have that right. That's why we're here. We're not here to just say, oh, 90,677,549, done. So I'll yield on that.
Thank you, Mr. Miko. Ms. Carpenter?
Thank you. Regarding the 400,000 for the maintenance line, I do not disagree in that. However, I would like to see how that surplus would be a prepay and show the difference in the upcoming budget. Essentially, somewhat of a shell game before I vote on it, because if that can't happen, if you can't move those two figures, then this committee does need to see how we're going to add $400,000, and I would like to be the ones to help identify where that's going to come from. And I'm not saying that we don't need it, but I really do need to see how you can make that flip before I vote.
I guess two responses. One is, I guess I get really, again, I'll use the word nervous, concerned when you talk about a surplus that very well may not be there. That being said, the only thing given what I'm hearing, but again, it'd be through the superintendent, there are two other worries, right? One is, and I don't necessarily, it's not my experience how it's done here, but to have all the custodians, maintenance staff, budgets associated outside of the school department, that's the current reality. And so even if we had 400,000 as a line item, and I have experience overseeing facilities, but there's a facilities director named Jim Hafey. And so trying to coordinate, even with the money, you need to coordinate the oversight and the procurement of those capital projects. Again, what I'm taking away from this, if there's any flexibility working, I think, and I don't want to speak for Josh, I think he's aware, if there's an opportunity, generally, good budgeting is, one-time sources of funds like ESSER, are used to pay one-time non-recurring expenses. Therefore, if there's a way to free up money in, in the facilities rental account by moving expenses to close out, if there's any balance available, then that could be then redirected over the summer, in subsequent years to be utilized, and it's appropriate in the facility usage account, its whole purpose for expenditures besides related custodial overtime is to reinvest in the repair and maintenance of the facilities being used. I'm still concerned about, I think with a fixed number, and right now I'm hearing nothing but that it's fixed at $90,677,549, and what is in this book that represents it. Adding a $400,000 line item, again, zero-sum game. Something's going to have to come out, and that just leaves exposure where we know already we have $2.4 million of exposure with one-time ESSER money not being replenished.
Mr. Olympio, would you like,
Somebody call on me, please.
you may speak now.
Feel like Arnold Horshack. No, my 2 cents, and then I'll get to Mr. Swanson, is that, what Mr. Hockman brought up is really what we used to do pre-COVID. We used to have differences of professional opinion every budget. And we have $90 million. And we used to have sheets where we would have pluses and minuses. And the big debate was, I know, just for an example, Ms. Carpenter likes the idea, what Mr. Hockman proposed, but at what expense? So we would have this back and forth, and we would have 3, 4, 5 budget meetings just on moving the money around. So, I'm certainly for Mr. Hockman, that motion that he made, and I think that's going to be our job and the admin team to, give us some options what we can trim. Maybe it turns out that we don't end up doing that, but I don't think it's anything crazy what we have to do. Like Mr. Amico said, it's our budget, and we've had back and forths. I would say, I think pre-COVID, we got into this situation where we had all this extra money. And it was just, for lack of a better word, it was maybe easy to just, we had money. But once the ESSER goes away, we're going to be back to 2018, 2019, and we're going to have these tough conversations. We have $400,000. Where do we want to put it? Do we take away an admin position? Do we take away supplies? These are the tough conversations that we used to have. We haven't had those tough conversations in the last couple of years. So we may have to have some tough conversations, I would guess, this week. So I'm all for, let's take a look at some other options, because to Mr. Hockman's point, I'm tired of hearing the AC's broke, this is broke. We want to have the ability to fix these things ASAP. So to me, there's nothing I heard that really knocks me off. And if we do have extra money, then that's great. But I'm not counting on that. I'm counting on we don't have any extra to play with, and it's going to be our job to take that $400,000, put it in a maintenance line, and what other areas can we afford to trim? Yes, certainly we don't want to directly impact the classrooms. But if we roll our sleeves up and somebody once said, find some change in the couch, we might get closer to that number that Mr. Hockman's looking at. And I'm not afraid if we have to stay here till midnight to do it, or we have to meet 2 or 3 times before Monday, that's what we have to do. So that's just my 2 cents on where we're at. And I have some questions on specific lines, but I'll yield for now and go to Mr. Swanson.
Thank you. Through to Mr. Hockman. Obviously, know this 400,000 proposal is extremely important to the city. I'm hoping that we can use surplus, but I think before I could vote, and I think everybody else, Mr. Olympio just said, I would like to know where we can find that money if we can't use the surplus. That's would make me comfortable. And to the chair, to Dr. Vidala, is there any room that we have, I guess, the proposals that we could find that for? Is there any room in the ESSER funding that we have or any of the grants that we have to cover some of these expenses that I'd like to see in the proposals where we find this money?
So in my opinion, the facilities are very important, and Mr. Hockman and I have talked at length about this. And I do believe that we want to make sure that our facilities are taken care of. This 90.6 is a very tight budget, given where we are. You know, we went back and forth, the mayor and I, about a number. Originally, I was hoping to come in about 1.5 above this to help ease off the cliff, which I think could have helped that out. I wouldn't be comfortable, you know, back of the napkin, cutting $400,000 from this budget. I know I've talked to the mayor, I don't want to speak for him, about using that facilities usage account for things like this, and if we get to a point where it's more money, you know, making sure that we improve our communication with the city and we get things done. I would just hate to take $400,000 out of this budget if we're able to pay for these things, you know, out of either capital expenses or something like that. It seems to be these are capital issues. We've done a number of great things with the facilities usage account, little Band-Aids, but it has been helpful. But overall, I think, you know, what we have in this budget, I would get nervous about a $400,000 reduction.
Thank you. Just one last question. I just want to, from my lack of experience, is there any issue with this type of budget and the maintenances that this would allow you to do? Would we have any union issues down the road? Would be the only concern that I'd ask. Lack of experience for that question.
We would not be able to pay a contractor to do union work without permission from the union.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I apologize for being late. I did think I'd be a little bit late, but I just got back from a double overtime girls lacrosse game in Boston, and I'm very happy to say that Peabody won 20-19 in double overtime in one of the craziest games I've ever seen. So anyway, sorry for being late, but as was mentioned by Mr. Olympio, I'm ready to be here late. If we need more meetings in the upcoming days, I'm available and ready. I know we have a lot to discuss. I apologize for missing some of the important discussions, but I wanted to see my daughter's game, and it was a terrific game. So I know right in the middle of a topic, to keep that topic going, Mr. Hockman, I'll turn it over to you and then open it back up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm glad that Peabody won. I'm glad you had the opportunity to watch your daughter play. That's more important than what we're doing in the big scheme of things. Just to kind of, there's a motion on the floor that I made, and I think Ms. Dunn seconded, to put $400,000 in a line for maintenance of the 10 school buildings. If I can, through you, to Mr. Swanson, you asked me, I think, or you expressed a little bit of discomfort in where we find this. I can tell you, and I don't want to be the person that does this, I'm hoping that the administration, through their work together, actually identify some areas that we can discuss to cut the budget. I can cut this by $2 million without blinking right now, and without affecting student services. And I don't want to do that, and I don't want to do that tonight, and I don't want to do that tomorrow. But there's a lot of room in this $90 million budget, in my opinion, where we can redirect some of that money. I'm not saying we're giving the money back to the city, so Mr. Mayor, don't get excited about that. But where I feel, in my opinion, we can redirect funds so that we can accomplish some of the goals and some of the desires that we as a committee, individual members of this committee have and have expressed over the course of our time working together. We've each talked about certain things that are important to us that we'd like to see happen. This is the show, right? This is when we get it done, because if it's in the budget, at least we can say it's funded. We have the ability to do it, the resources to stand behind it, the personnel that we can pay for to do the work or to do whatever it is that we're looking to accomplish. So this is our, as Mr. Olympio and Mr. Miko said, this is our ability to put our stamp, right? Not the rubber stamp, but our stamp on what we want to see as a school district. And I respect that Dr. Vidala has worked diligently with his administrative team with their goals and their focus, and he's worked with the principals through the school improvement plans and listened to staff members and stakeholders within the district. And I think that they're coming up with what they believe is the best for our school district. Please don't take it in any other way. But we have an opportunity, and this is our opportunity to say this is what we want this money spent on, and that's solely our purview. We're the only ones, the 6 and 7, if the mayor needs to break a tie, we're the only ones that say where we spend the money in the school district, whether that be budgeted money coming from Chapter 70, whether that's coming from city revenue from tax, the real estate taxes, whether that's coming from ESSER, whether that's coming from a state grant. We have to live within the parameters of some of those grants, but we get to direct where that money goes, and that's our stamp on the budget and what the school district looks like day to day. Just like, when we engage in seeking a superintendent, we want someone who has our vision, right? Our vision of what we want our school district to be. And I think we have that, right? We worked hard at getting Dr. Vidala, and Dr. Vidala, I think usually expresses that and works well with that. But we get to, I don't want to rewrite a $90 million budget. I don't want to do anybody else's job. But what I do want to do is I want to come out of this budget process saying that we've heard some things that go on in the school district, and, well, I don't want to say I'm going to get to that next year, or, hey, you got to be patient again, right? I want to say that we at least put it up to votes, and I'm not saying that the motion that's on the floor is going to pass. And I will say that even if it does pass and we look at $400,000 coming out of some other lines, if that's what we need to do, and we need to reconsider this vote for $400,000 and knock it down to something less than that, I'm a reasonable person. I don't want to start sounding like I'm in New York or anything like that around the table, but I'm a reasonable guy. But at some point, and again, I don't mean to, you've been here the least amount of time, and that's not your fault, but, when budgets were tight, this is precisely what we would do. We would prioritize things that we, as committee members, felt were necessary in the district, and it's a difficult decision when you have to retract, right? When you have to say, I see this line item that the superintendent feels is important, but we as a committee think that this expense is more important, right? It's not to say what he's putting in here isn't important, because it certainly is, but that's part of our function. In the last few years with ESSER and with a lot of other, funding coming in, I think Mr. Olympio's been right. It's kind of, it's been a little bit easier, because we're used to saying, frankly, what I'm used to seeing is, Dr. Vidala and his team putting together a proposed budget, which is what this is, for $93,222,000, and I forget how much of that is granted. I think it's 90 million and change is the what do you call the core budget or so yeah, the appropriated budget. What I'm used to seeing is that the superintendent puts a $90 million appropriated budget out, and the mayor, not necessarily this mayor, but the mayor comes up and says, we only have $87 million to give you. And then we have a choice of, well, we have to cut $2.5 million or $3 million from what the superintendent says is necessary without fully funding a budget. And that's been the process that we've gone through year after year. And just to keep it a little tighter for this particular issue that's before us in the motion, one of the first things we did when we had those budgets was cut maintenance, right? We said we don't want to take funding away from classrooms. right? And nobody does. Nobody wants to take away the money that's necessary for education, safety, you know, a bunch of other stuff that we're going to talk about through, whether it's tonight or this week, and I have thoughts on that too. But maintenance was the first thing we cut. And then we saw, you know, that the 8-year-old Carroll School or the 8-year-old Brown School was starting to suffer deficiencies that were premature for a building of that age. And it was because we weren't providing basic maintenance. I mean, imagine you're not servicing your furnace for a tune-up every year, right? I mean, you can't cut that because in 3 years you're buying a new furnace that should last for 20 or 30 years. You know, you just have to have certain basic maintenance. You know, we go to and it's exacerbated, unfortunately, because of staffing, right? We just can't fill positions, which is nobody's fault, and I'm not blaming the people that are working within our school district for these functions because they're doing the best that they can do with what they have. But, you know, I talked to staff members around the district who don't have equipment that might allow them to do more with fewer people because they can't get the people. And, you know, there might have been a point in time in my career here as a committee member where I thought that getting equipment might have saved us by reducing the number of people. I don't think that way anymore. I'm not looking to reduce people. So, you know, anyone out there that thinks that I'm asking for $400,000 in maintenance so that we can cut the number of custodians, trust me, that's not where my focus is. My focus is to get our buildings in the proper shape and to keep them in the best condition possible on a daily basis for as long as we can. We're going to go into, hopefully, an agreement with the MSBA for a new high school this year or next year, or maybe the year after that, whatever it comes down, which is going to lock us into funding that we're going to have to pay for our high school, which is going to push the center school back, right? Because we're probably not going to get funded for 2 schools. And we're already looking at spending significant money on the center school for that, for maintenance, just to get it up to, you know, up to being reasonable for our students and staff. What's the next building? Right? If we keep cutting maintenance and don't have this basic maintenance, what's the next building? Well, I tell you what, we're not replacing that next building for 14 years. Because we're going to have hopefully the high school, which is going to be locking us in for 7 years, and then hopefully a center school, which is going to lock us in for the 7 years after that. You know, that next school, you know, it might be the West. It might be the Burke. I don't know what it is, but those buildings were put up in the 60s and 70s, right? I mean, there's going to come a time that they fail to the point and deteriorate to the point that the Kylie suffered and the center is suffering. At some point, my opinion, and I'd like to take the vote tonight, my opinion is that we just need to prioritize maintaining our buildings so that we have our staff and students in buildings that are adequate for them, and they don't have to worry about bringing an extra sweater, and they don't have to worry about mice running around, and they don't have to worry about whether they can open a window or see through a window. I just want to have some basic maintenance. So I hope that answers your question. It was a long-winded response, and I've taken more time than even Ms. Dunn, so I apologize to the committee.
Mr. Hockman, I missed that. Can you repeat that, please? But no, thank you. Mr. Miko.
Through the chair, thank you, Mr. Hockman. You're always a difficult act to follow, but I'll try. So I still agree with Mr. Hockman on the maintenance line. I just wanted to go back to our budget. Federal government has a budget, states have budgets, cities have budgets. We all have personal budgets. I'll just give you a quick scenario. I opened up one of my statements and I noticed that I was paying for 3 streaming services, okay? Netflix, Disney Plus, and Apple. I had no idea I had Apple Video, whatever, Apple TV, okay? So I cut it. It was in there, I cut it. So who are we to say that there aren't 3 streaming services in here and we need to pull one out in order to put one of our wants and needs in? And, you know, your $400,000, Mr. Hockman, for a maintenance line, I have a whole list of things that I've been trying to put in for the last couple of years. So I'll be bringing this up. I know through the chair, Ms. Carpenter will be bringing items up. This is what we do. The 6 of us are elected to do that, to listen to the people. When you go to Stop and Shop and you're out for a gallon of milk and you come home 45 minutes later, there's a reason, right? You ran into someone who wants to talk about an item that they really are passionate about. These are people who may work in our schools. These are people who are parents or grandparents. We owe it to them, okay? And that's not to say that our administration doesn't do a great job to provide us with this budget, but we also have people that we have to, listen to and hopefully agree in some way. We saw this during COVID. We were such a split school committee here, but we were always respectful. We were always compromising, and that's what government is all about. It's about compromise. We have a $90 million budget, but what's in here right now is probably not going to be in here come Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever we're voting for this budget when we have the public meeting. So, to say that one line item, we have no room for it, well, we have until Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever we're voting for. So I say bring everything that you think we really need, and we'll try to figure this out. I'll yield.
Offer something through the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Amico. Yes.
Let me be clear, because I've overseen facilities in past roles. What you're asking for the kind of expenses that should be funded, especially in the area of preventative maintenance, I agree. Filter changes, all of it, maintaining boilers, the things that'll cost a hell of a lot of money if you don't, and their useful life is shortened. I don't like having to, not that I ultimately make the decision, you do, but if I were you, I would want to know, I'd want to have full information to make an informed decision, not an uninformed decision. And I guess what I'm asking, and I can ask Mike Gingras tomorrow, is what in the municipal budget for repairs and maintenance of facilities, of which we have most of the square footage, what is allocated, not the staff, but the contracted services, the preventive maintenance, because it'd be nice to look at and see what there is first before an isolation. Maybe the money's already there and it's not being, and again, I'm not trying to accuse anybody of anything, but I'd look at that first, because we don't have proper context with respect to budgets for repairs and maintenance of our buildings.
Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Rippon made a good point. I do think we should see what amount of money is out there for the use of the maintenance of the buildings, and what it costs for the contracted services. I think it would be helpful to us so that we would know if that amount of money needs to be increased or somehow addressed through our budget, because what you just said really does make sense. That's all I want to say at the moment.
I can tell you right now that there's not money available in our, if we're hoping as a committee that we're gonna have be flush with cash because our facilities department on the city side may have some money, it's just not gonna happen. So I don't want us to waste time and hope for the best there, because that's just not gonna be.
Oh, no.
No, but
No, but
Mr.
actually,
Rippon brought it up as like, oh, maybe there could be some potential money there. Let's look there first before we look here. It's not.
oh, I'll be honest, Mr. Mayor, that's not how I heard it. What I heard
that
was,
is-
if we know what is being apportioned for the school facilities, we don't know that right now. As a school committee, we don't know.
So maybe I misunderstood. So you're talking about just, you need a list of our contracted services?
I guess
Well-
I'm assuming your base budget isn't zero for facilities.
So, okay.
Yeah, there's got to be, I'm separating out the staff, the custodial staff and everything that you put over there. But there's got to be a budget for the use of repairs and, as I say, contracted services. And that's absolutely important, because as a school committee member, I learned that the hard way, that contracted services need to be followed through, or it can void our warranties, It creates problems on the equipment in the buildings. We need to make sure that there's money for that, because as a school committee member, years ago, we were told, oh, you don't have to worry about that, and we cut it to pay for a teacher, thinking, oh, we can do it next year. You couldn't. You couldn't air balance a system at the Carroll School. 5 years later, we ended up with problems down there, and what are we replacing now at the Carroll School? Those things were, I never was told what specifically they were. Now, I want to look at those. I want to make sure we're following through on our contracted services, and you definitely need to keep those in the budget. But right now, we as a school committee don't know that, and we as a school committee are, seeing what the schools are dealing with, but we can't ask these questions on our side of the ledger. And I will throw one other story out there. Years ago, I was faced with a decision, and we were told as the school committee, well, you can vote that $300,000, and you're going to have to let 6 teachers go. And at the time, we had high class sizes, and we had just kind of reached an agreement on, the number of teachers and everything. So for that $300,000 that we needed, we did not utilize it for a facility. We kept the teachers. The facility was the Kiley School. And much of the damage at the Kiley School right now, I would bet, is the result of that decision. And I have regretted that decision every day, and even more so. So that's just a cautionary tale from experience. But we should be able to have that information about the facilities, the funding for the maintenance of the buildings, so that we do know if we even need the $400,000 line item.
Nope, now you stated it that way, I understand Mr. Rippin's point. I was thinking something differently. Yeah, certainly that's information I can get. I don't think there's going to be, again, much room there to maneuver. Every dollar is pretty much accounted for, as to different services, and, like this budget, it's broken down, and when we present to the city council, each department, each contracted services is broken down line item by line item as to who's getting what and what business is being paid. So it's pretty detailed on that. So we can get that information just so you have it. But I wanted to make sure that we're not thinking that there's, going to be $400,000 and that's not being utilized in that department.
Before you got here, I was going to go ask you for $400,000, so I'll throw that out there again.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Carpenter.
Thank you. Regarding that, on the city side, when they create those line items for our maintenance budget, do they speak to you, Dr. Vidala, about what we need and where we're at, and to create those budget line items?
So I've been in touch with Jim Hafey about what we need in terms of year to year, but in terms of building the budget, it's pretty set with what they have for existing contracts and things like that. It hasn't been any new additional things.
So I guess to the point that we're all wondering is, if there has not been an increase on the city side to those line items, then we are directly where we were and are right now. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know if there's been an increase, but we can certainly get that information.
Okay, because I understand what you're saying. My position is, again, if we're going to do the shell game with the $400,000 surplus and prepay something, I want to know what it is. If we're not going to do that, I'd like to know what we're going to cut as a committee. I do not disagree that I would like to have the $400,000 as a emergency fund, as a buffer. If somebody can't get out and fix something, we're able to take care of that. I don't disagree, but I also have things that I would like to discuss after this that will impact our budget as well. And if the suggestion from this committee is to just put motions forward of things that you'd like to see and have Dr. Vidala, Dr. Vidala and Mr. Rippin figure it out and come back to us, I can do that, but I still would like to come back to us and see how that works out. But I'm just trying to figure out, how is this committee trying to move forward? Is this your plan, or are we gonna get down to the nitty-gritty?
So real quickly on that, then I'll go to you, Mr. Miko, next. So I'll get that information for the facilities department, get that out to everybody right away tomorrow, so you can kind of see the breakdown. And each, that department has a full budget, line items, all different utilities and all different contracted services. And, it has all, probably 25, in addition to salary and benefits. Then it breaks it down into individual utilities and expenses and all that type of stuff. So I'll get that over to you, as well as the contracted services. But, what we've done, and this is something, that I know a number of you are familiar with, like Thursday night, just for an example, I'm going to the city council for $500,000 for work that's out of the city budget, for the center school. So we're looking to do new tiling at the center school and a complete asbestos abatement over the summer to take that out of play before we do the big project with the heating system. But we have an opportunity, a window to get this work done now, this summer. We want to do that work over at the center. So we're just taking that out of free cash, out of our city numbers. That's not something I brought forward to the committee. In addition to that, there's $180,000, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Vidala, for some high school work. The chiller.
Yeah, so we're doing 2 chillers, one at the Carroll School and one at the high school. It's about, it's almost $1 million. It's 980, I believe. Of that, we did get a grant, which we have spoken about, the IVAC grant, which will pay for $806,000. The remaining balance, this is what Mr. Mayor is talking about, going to the city council to pay for that balance. So we're getting almost $1 million worth of work done at the Carroll and the high school for $180,000.
So that just, I am presenting, be there Thursday night. I expect that there'll be great support for this. But those are projects at 3, major projects at 3 of the schools. One at the high school, one at the Carroll, and then certainly one at the center. And then in September, we're on track to bring forward the bigger project at the center school in terms of replacing the heating system, which we expect to be multiple millions of dollars. That'll be on the city side on our debt service. So, there are a number of things under our debt service that are certainly school-related, but the way I've been trying to look at it over the past few years for buildings has been, we have the 10 schools, the 5 fire stations, the police station, and I can list all of the 3 libraries, all of that. But that's all part of the city debt service. And these projects that we're now going to be doing at the school, particularly the center, which is going to be a big project for us, that'll just be paid out of the city and debt service. You're not going to see that line item in the facilities department, as a contracted service or anything. It's just on the debt service. So I did want to make sure, not only is it the facilities department, but it's also our debt service that is covering a lot of these payments. And just taking it from free cash, we've been able to build up our free cash a little bit over the last couple of years for projects like this. It's the center school needs this work done. So we've been able to, utilize some free cash reserves that we've been able to build up a little bit to pay for these important projects. So it's difficult, and we've been in touch with Dr. Vidal and his team about upcoming capital projects that he sees. We are going to be putting forward, like I said, another capital request in September. There could be some other items that we could include as part of that capital request as well, potentially for other projects that might be needed. I know we looked at a couple of things, maybe some Chromebooks and other things, but we're going to incorporate that into the budget. But, those are things too also to keep in mind is, we're doing some real capital work coming up because, like you've been talking about, we're trying to maintain our buildings, extend the life cycles of our buildings, and it's not that easy to do. Finally, I think we're still short a couple of custodians, but we're getting to full staff. For those couple of years, we couldn't hire people. We just couldn't find people to work. So that didn't help our cause either with some of these buildings. But I think now we're up to maybe still 2, maybe 3 custodians we're still short. But I think our trades team is, the trades maintenance is now full. but I still think we're a little light on custodians, but that's been a battle too for since COVID. Sorry, I got a little off topic there. I said Mr. Miko, then I'm gonna go to Mr. Olympio, then get back around to everybody.
Thank you, through the chair. And to be a little off topic, I did hear that your daughter scored the game-winning goal, so congratulations to her and to your family. All right, back on topic. So, $400,000 of a $90 million budget is approximately less than a half of a percentage point. If the six of us cannot find a half of a percentage point in a $90 million budget to help supplement that line item, then we're in trouble, okay? Especially if we, through the chair, if we, Ms. Carpenter, if we want to add paras, or if I want to add safety, we're going to have to do this. So my suggestion is, every time, other than one of us putting something forward, we're going to be in this predicament of talking for an hour over one line item. What I would suggest is, let's fire away. This is draft day for us, right? Draft day, this is what we do. Put forward who you want, pick what you want, and then we'll see where we can get. But to focus on one line item for the last half hour, and then, Ms. Carpenter, you'll have one, I'll have one, Ms. Dunn will have one, Mr. Olympia will have one. We'll be here 10 hours. And that's fine by me, but I say we just push everything forward, and then we'll figure out of what we push forward, what we really need. And then if we do need those items, then we'll look into our budget to see what we don't need. And I think that's, again, within our purview. So I'd like to take a vote, if we could, on Mr. Hockman's motion, and then continue this discussion on what we want to see in the budget. I'll yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miko. I'm gonna go to Mr. Olympio.
Thank you. So, yeah, on that, I mean, I have 3 or 4 line items that I just have questions on, that I don't understand maybe the line item. So maybe, I think this maybe kind of dialogue might unravel some, maybe it's wishful thinking, but hey, that's something that we can, like, I'll just give you, for instance, I was looking at tab 18, okay, that's under staff development. Now, again, Dr. Videla, you could say, no, this is we need this, that kind of thing. But when I review this budget book, put aside the contracted raises and things like that, I look for swings, large percentage swings, and why something jumps up, and I don't, know the answer at that point. Like, I see tuition reimbursement. Last year, there wasn't a line item. There's a line item there for $57,500. You might,
Yes. So that is an increase that was from the contract, the CBA.
Okay.
It was previously paid out of one of the entitlement grants. Now
Okay.
that money is over what the whole allotment of the grant is.
Okay.
So we're unable to pay for that out of the grant. It's in the appropriated budget. And in the second iteration, what I did is I took it out and put it in ESSER.
Okay.
Right? So that's one of those expenses that was previously paid for a grant. I put it in to the staff development because that's showing what we're paying. And then in this $90 million budget, it's in the ESSER one. So if you look at the ESSER page, it's in that. So there are a couple items like that, especially in staff development and curriculum and instruction. Those are 2 big increases that we see, and those are all non-salary items. And so those are the things that I put into ESSER around our curriculum adoption and things like that, that are not people. So one of the things I heard loud and clear from the committee was, don't over-rely on people in ESSER, because we don't want that cliff for people. And so we went from about 60 staff members down to 15 or 16 in this iteration. So I did put everything that we're spending money on in the $93 million budget so we could see all the backup in it. And then in the $90 million budget, we took out some of those non-salary expenses, especially in staff development and curriculum and instruction, just to try to fund those.
Okay, fair. Yep.
But, and just to continue, I mean, this has been a very healthy discussion. These numbers are my recommendations.
Right,
And so
exactly.
whatever the will of the committee is, we'll work together and make sure we do whatever the committee
And
wants
this
to do.
isn't
So-
anything, with prior superintendents, this was the back and forth that we would have. Prior superintendents would have their their A list, their B list, and their C list, and we would go back and forth. So
Absolutely, and I would love to come to you with a $100 million budget, right? But I know, I want to try to keep this within
Yep.
within what the mayor had set
Right.
for the parameters, and knowing that there is wiggle room with whatever the will of the committee is, trying to, make sure that all of the things that are valued and important are contained in this budget. Or we find another funding source. We go, I know that we've talked before. Let's find another funding source to make sure that we're allocating those. We just got a $60,000 school safety grant, right? That's not going to go to people. It's going to go to threat assessment and training and things like that. But those are the important things that we're out there looking for, and we're trying to incorporate to enhance the budget and to supplement what is voted on.
Great. And then there was another line for now, and I'll yield after this. It was line, tab 22. And can you explain to me, it's line 22025, salary, teachers severance. What exactly is that?
Yeah, so teachers, when people retire,
Yep.
the contracted pieces, they get paid out for a portion of their sick time, or they get
Okay,
paid
so
out.
that's- okay,
So
that's-
that's what, when they leave, that's sort of.
Their accumulated time.
Accumulated time, things like
Right,
that. When
okay.
teachers retire, that is typically what we spend. So a few years ago, we had sort of under budgeted it, and
Okay.
as people retired, we had to
I
spend
had
more
a
than
feeling
that.
that's what it was, but
Yeah.
I just wanted.
So that is what our contractual obligations are when teachers retire, and we have to pay out, accrued sick leave and things like that per the CBA.
Fair enough. Gail yield, thank you.
Mr. Hockman?
Thank you. Ms. Carpenter, as non-chair, I'll talk to you. No, your question, which may have been rhetorical in terms of what the committee wants to do, I say you're precisely right. Let's throw it out there. Let's put our wishes out there. I'd prefer voting on them so that we have some real backup to it. And then if we need to reconsider those votes, we reconsider those votes. But let's put out our wish list, and let's be pragmatic, right? The public meeting on this budget is next Tuesday. We have no further notices for meetings this week. I think that we're still required to give 48 hours notice even if we recess. I'm not sure about that, but that's what I think. That takes us into Friday of Memorial Day weekend. Monday is a federal holiday. And Tuesday night, we're going to be here to vote on a public budget, supposedly, right? That's the timeline that we have out there. That public budget needs to be in the hands of, I don't know if it's Marge or who actually puts the budget physically together to hand to the public. By law, they're entitled to a physical copy of the budget. And so it's not as if we can come here at 3 o'clock on Tuesday and next Tuesday and say, hey, let's hammer out the rest of these details. So we're maybe here for a long time tonight, maybe not, I don't know. But this is the night, right? This is the night where we're going to put out, this is what we'd like to see in the budget. Let's do it by vote and ask the administration to look at what we're voting on and come back to us with some suggestions about where we can either find funding from or not. And then we can make a determination on what we're going to do at some point. But we're going to need to meet again at least one more time. I'm hoping it's just one more time before the public budget. And then we vote. But in any event, we have spent, I think someone said 45 minutes, a half hour on my motion. I would like to call a vote on it because we do need to move on. So if we can call the roll.
Can you please say the motion again, Mr. Hockman?
Yeah, so my motion essentially is to add $400,000 to a line for maintenance in the 23-24 Peabody Public School budget. And I believe it was seconded by Ms. Dunn. I don't know if she's recanting that.
Well,
That's the motion.
I was the chair for a minute. I moved my seat, and Mr. Hockman was talking to me.
Yeah.
Can I respond?
Yes.
Oh, apologies.
Well, we will get to a vote on that motion in short order, but I do, Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you. Regarding the way we're going to roll this out with what we'd like to see happen and the things that we'd like to move around in the budget and taking votes on them. I guess my preference would be to say all the things that we want to happen and then have Dr. Vidala come back and show us how he's making them happen. Because my fear is we're going to make a motion on something very large, like $400,000, and there's going to be a missed beat in there and something's going to be taken away that we don't want. And I want to be very specific on how these things are going to happen before I take a vote.
My small expenditure, Ms. Carpenter. Wait till I get to the big stuff.
And nobody else has even gotten to any of this
Yeah,
stuff.
right,
so-
no, I know, and I understand what you're saying, and,
Yeah.
and I don't, and I guess what my response, and I respect that, and I think typically I would wanna, if I may, Mr. Mayor, I would operate in the fashion that you're suggesting. I'm just really concerned with time, and I just don't know.
I don't want to vote no.
Yeah, I don't want you to vote no either.
I just want to see how it's going to happen.
The only thing I can assure you is that I would be the person to bring a motion to reconsider if there was consternation to the point that it was unable to accomplish what I'm seeking to accomplish.
And by that, I mean not taking any people away from students. And I'm worried about where it's going to come from.
Well, I'm optimistic about this surplus, first of all, but you all know how I feel about the prep. So that would be one area where I said I can cut $2 million without blinking. That would be one area where I can cut $850,000. And I don't think that that's something that this committee would support me on. But there are other lines in this item for personnel that don't get in front of the students that I think we have the ability to trim. And I think that there are other opportunities within the budget. We've taken risks on certain other things in the past that we haven't in this budget or haven't looked to in recent budgets because of the excess of money that we've been afforded. Mr. Rippon has identified the opportunity to raise some fees, some of which I would be in favor of, some of which I wouldn't be in favor of, but I don't know how the committee feels about that. So I think that there are ways to look at it. The last thing I can assure you, and we've, you know, we haven't agreed on everything over the course of the years, Ms. Carpenter, but I can assure you that one thing we do agree on is we don't want to take people out of classrooms. We don't want to take teachers away from kids. We don't want to take specialists away from kids. We don't want to take mental health professionals away from kids. We don't want to, neither one of us want to do either of those things, and I wouldn't do those things just like you wouldn't do those things. But I do think that there's sufficient room to find this, and all I'm saying is at some point we gotta hit the accelerator, that's all.
Okay.
Mr. Amico?
One more through the chair on that, and as I said earlier, if we don't take votes and we keep on voting things down, we're not going to be able to add anything that we want. So my suggestion, again, with what Ms. Carpenter said, what Mr. Hockman said is, let's make motions. They pass into, then we'll look back into the budget. But to not take these votes and not put these forward, then we're just going to be sitting here and, you know, we're not going to get anything accomplished.
Okay, so we do have a motion on the table right now. Before we go to that, Mr. Swanson.
Sorry, through you to Ms. Carpenter, and obviously this is my first time. As Mr. Olympio said, I've been spoiled by last year's budget. Obviously, over the time, what your proposal is to list all out and then come find the money and then vote on the budget again? How has this been done in the past? And I appreciate the help.
Through the chair to Mr. Swanson, the budget for many of us done so many different ways. So my suggestion is to let the superintendent know what it is that we want and to have him come back and figure out how to make that happen to the satisfaction of the committee, or we figure out how to make it happen right now by, you know, you find, you know, Mr. Hockman wants $400,000, well, then we have to suggest cuts of $400,000. So it's either we pick it or Dr. Vidala picks it. So if you want something, you got to pay for it.
No, that's understood.
If I may, Ms. Carpenter, are you suggesting that everybody lists their wants and we put a number next to it? So you say, I would like to add this, and we say, what would that cost? And Mr. Rippon and we do a cost analysis, and then we have a list of everything that everybody wants. Is that what we're looking for, or are we looking for Mr. Hockman's idea of voting on each one individually? I mean, I think we could do it either way, but whatever the will of the committee is, if there's a list of everything that people want and we put a cost next to it, is that helpful?
Well, if we vote on this $400,000 and it goes forward, I would expect at the next meeting for you to come back and tell me how that's gonna happen. Or we're gonna sit down right now and figure out how it's gonna happen.
Well, absolutely. I mean, but I know that there are other wants.
There are, I'm
So,
ready to talk again.
And I'm wondering if we list all the wants, and that helps the votes on what you prioritize, as opposed to voting on one item without knowing what the other wants are to prioritize over that.
I guess if I could follow up.
You know what, and just to point out, before we go further, there is a time issue. I recognize that. And, you know, can't play Monday morning quarterback, but this shouldn't be happening like this. And I hope it never happens again. And I think the next budget we do is gonna be way worse. And we need to have a lot more time on it, because this is what we do, this is how we operate. And I cannot stand the fact that we are under the gun right now.
I guess-
And I'm sorry, you know, this isn't a reflection on you, it's just a reflection on some of the times right now. But I would also expect moving forward that we get a quarterly report, we meet more frequently about fees, those type of things. That being said, I recognize we're not in that position right now. We do have to move quickly. So I guess making the best possible decisions moving forward is what we have to do, but I just want to have a plan on how we're going to tease it out.
And I guess if I could, and I think Josh was spot on in this way. You know, it's your right to ask for things. It's my responsibility as best I can on the fly to cost them out. I think it's best to get them all out there, get a total number, and then ideally, if the committee can even agree on priorities, because, you know, they're all going to hit certain, you know, let's say this is the number one priority, and this is a $400,000 ask out of $3 million. Well, what are the cuts that get to 400, you know, what has to come out? What are the least painful things? You know, and you know, I guess is how, you know, but I first have to, we have to lay it out, not do this, in my opinion, not do this in isolation, and come up with the best estimate of what those costs are for these proposals.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor,
Stockman.
again, I agree with what Ms. Carpenter's saying and what Mr. Rippon is saying. But let me ask before we go to the vote, when do we meet again? Through you, maybe to Ms. Dunn, do we need yeah, I saw you reading, and I don't know if we recess, if we need a 48-hour notice. I hope not, because I don't want to see you people this weekend. No, you know, we all have plans, and I'm hoping maybe we can meet tomorrow, and hopefully that's enough time for the administration to get the information that we're looking for. But we are on a crunch, and if we can meet tomorrow, maybe Thursday, I'd be more inclined to follow Ms. Carpenter's suggestion of laying out all of our wishes and putting a price, an estimated price with those, and then handing that off to the administration and seeing, you know, what it looks like with everything, what it looks like with some of it, what are we going to amend out of the budget proposal that's before us in order to accomplish some of our wishes. I usually prefer operating that way. That's, you know, if we have a 48-hour notice requirement, though, we're meeting Friday, right? Because we're not meeting Monday. And I know that some committee members have expressed a displeasure in meeting on weekends, and that leaves us Friday. So I don't know, and maybe we can wait for Ms. Dunn to, I'm filibustering at this point because I'm waiting for Ms. Dunn. I can start reading the yeah, I can pull out my pocket constitution like Senator Byrd from West Virginia used to do and start reading it on the floor. There you go. But no, seriously, it's.
I'm trying to remember before, but I think when we recessed budget hearings in the past, we had posted a list of the dates and just recessed to the next date. And in this case, it's a bit different. if you can give me another couple minutes, if you want to take a recess, I will keep looking this up just so we know what we can do. But there is nothing in the open meeting law regulations from the Attorney General's office regarding a recessed meeting. So now I need to look in Mass General laws.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, maybe we do take a 5-minute recess, if that's okay with you?
5-minute recess, motion made, all in favor, or seconded by Mr. Olympio, all in favor. 5-minute break.
Okay. I'm going to call Glenn. Pardon? Thanks.
Okay, like to call the meeting back to order. I did not. Go ahead, Ms. Dunn, do you have something to add on that item we broke for?
A recess is always permissible under Robert's rules, which we follow. The only question is the length of the recess. And according to Robert's rules, it's for a short recess with a time determinable. Now, if we recess for tonight with a time set for tomorrow, I honestly am not sure under Massachusetts general laws and the Attorney General's advisories as to whether that is permissible. And I really feel terrible because it's such a simple it seems like such a simple question. My first reaction was, of course we can recess till tomorrow. But then looking at the rules, I honestly don't know if we can do it without notice. I think that anyone watching this meeting is someone who wants to follow through to the very end and is going to want to, see it again as it continues tomorrow. But I don't know what to tell you. I am sorry.
Well, I believe we can meet
Okay.
in that, but I have a call on the city solicitor. I suggest that we meet a little bit longer here, and I have some suggestions as to how the rest of the meeting should go. And then break, if I don't get a definitive answer from the city solicitor, then I think we break with the expectation that we will meet tomorrow night after the George Peabody Medal Ceremony at 6 p.m. That's over at the library. We honor our top 80 students and meet back here after that, top 8 students. And we go under that plan. If we have to, and we have to cancel that meeting and, set it up for Thursday, then that's what we have to do. But I think the remainder of this meeting, or at least a good chunk of this meeting, should be, let's get out the items that we really want Dr. Vidal and his team to really focus on and prioritize. The maintenance certainly is one that has a lot of merit, needs to be discussed. I know there's some talk about paras and some other things that some of the members want to bring up. And I think we create a list, try to prioritize as best we can the top few that we really want Dr. Vidal to look at. Then he can go to work tomorrow with his team and try to figure out how to go about fitting those items in. I think that's the best way to go here. I think we can get into major discussions, and I think we've already had some good ones, but I think we need to hone in on which specific items we really want to try to add to this budget. And I know all of us have firm thoughts on that. Then let Dr. Vidal get to work with his team, come back hopefully tomorrow, and really talk these items through, and hopefully reach an agreement on at least some of them, And then, there could be some items that, we have to even dig deeper into at tomorrow's meeting or Thursday's meeting, we can do that. But I think that's the way we have to proceed here. I think we're all kind of around the same thing, but I think we need to hone in on that. Mr. Hockman.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that guidance and leadership. To that end, I withdraw my motion that was on the floor and hope that we proceed in the manner that the mayor described.
All right, so what I want to do then, thank you, Mr. Hockman, I appreciate that courtesy. But that item very much is on all of our minds, the $400,000. So I know already Dr. Vidal has already factored that one in and is going to be working on that. But let's talk about some of the other items that all of us have brought up at earlier meetings or requests for information. Let's get into some of those specifics that we really think we need to discuss and add for the next discussion. So I'll open that up now. Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you. Through the chair to Dr. Vidala, I would like to talk about the conversation we had regarding full-time paras at the lower grade level, how we're going to fulfill that. You did send me some paperwork regarding those positions. Could you just please update everyone as to where we stand in that regard?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. So I did email this, but just so that we're all here on the same page. This is, this is a posting of the first column here, if everybody can see it, I know it's a little bit small, is the FY23 FTEs that we had. And I want to thank Dr. Higgins and Ms. Crompton for putting this together. These are our special education paras. So in the district, we have 150 special education paras this year. So this column is FY23. The next column is FY24, what we have in the proposed budget, the full-time and the part-time, and then what we have in grants and revolving accounts, full-time and part-time, so the total paras. So in all, for special education, we have 150 paras. Of the 150, 123 are full-time paras, 27 are part-time paras. This number is for the special education paras. It does not include the part-time kindergarten paras that we have. But this is just for special education, the integrated preschool, all of the elementary schools, middle school, and high school, all programs. So this is the 150 paras that we have. Of that, again, 123 are full-time, and what we want to do is prioritize those full-time positions at the elementary and pre-K. So, for example, we have a total of 16.5 FTEs at the preschool at the McCarthy, 10 full-time and 3 part-time in the appropriated budget, 2 full-time and 8 part-time in grants and revolvers. What we would be recommending is that we move that to all full-time paras. So instead of 16.5 FTEs, we would raise that up to 17 and have all full-time paras at the McCarthy preschool. And we would do that for where we see these elementary programs, and what we would be doing is looking at the Higgins and the high school and making sure that the full-time paras are in the programs, the sub-separate small group programs that we have, and the inclusion paras, we would be providing teachers, special education teachers, or part-time paras to be in those positions.
Thank you for this. That is the situation that I'm looking for. So the most vulnerable students and some of the youngest ones have the consistency.
Would have that consistent full-time paraprofessional,
That
yes.
that is the adjustment that I would like to see. And I do believe that the job postings, the part-time positions seem to be a lot less desirable for people at this time. And I think you'll get a better draw for somebody who's looking for a full-time position. And I think the fact that the cost of that includes healthcare is a reasonable, adjustment to make to get that type of care for the most vulnerable of our students. I think that's something that's needed, and I think that we will have a much smoother time in some of those classrooms. I know in the integrated preschool and some of our special education classes, the time that it takes for different situations is a lot more serious, and you need more hands on deck, and you need someone they're familiar with. It makes a big difference. So I'm not sure if that's going to show a difference in the budget. Do you have a projection to fulfill that?
Based on what you're recommending, and I fully agree, I think that the next budget that we can bring forth will have what you've wanted, and we can make it budget neutral. I think we can do what you're asking without adding to the budget. And I think, but I do think that you will see some reflection, some changes in what this looks like a little bit, and we can make those changes. And I do think that those are changes that we can get into the next iteration of the budget.
Okay.
Just using my words then, and I was sort of hoping you would say that, Josh, and believe it. It's, as long as the total composition of full and part-time doesn't change and they're just being redistributed to the lower grades, it would be, in fact, budget neutral.
Yeah, so that would just be something that I'm looking for you to bring back. That was one of the things I wanted to address for the next meeting. And one other thing that I would like to address while I still have the floor is in the West School, so that's tab, I think it's 8. I'm looking at the reduction of line 8012 for the teacher in special education. And then when I flip over to that line, could you just clarify for me what that reduction is from?
Yes, so we have 3 choices teachers this school year, and we had split it up, say K and 1, 2 and 3, 4 and 5. We did not have any students in K and 1, or we had one student in grade 1, and throughout the year, we had staff out for different reasons, and so one of those staff members was filling in either for a maternity or a medical leave, and so throughout the year, at any given time, for the majority of the year, we only had 2 people working. And so we were able to, with a retirement, absorb one of those positions. The program doesn't need the three teachers that it has. It only needs 2 teachers based on enrollment, and we were able to provide one of those teachers with a different position filled by a retirement. So it was a reduction of a position that I believe is not necessary because we don't have the enrollment in that program.
So just to clarify, the 3 teachers basically were 2 throughout the year because it was balancing. The enrollment changed. What is the enrollment?
So I can get you the exact numbers. I believe the K1 only had one student, and so that person was working, that the student was in the 2 to 3, so it was really grades 1 to 3. And so I don't have that number, but I can get it for you tomorrow.
Okay. And then the reduction of that teacher, did you say that that teacher was going someplace else
Staying within the building.
within the building?
Yep. So there was a retirement, and the teacher was able to move into a position in the building.
And the students that are enrolled in the Choices program, highly vulnerable, require paras one-on-one, is that correct?
They require paras, I believe, let me see, the West. Last year, we had 10 budgeted. We're budgeting 6 full-time paras in the appropriated budget and 6 FTEs in the grants and revolvers. So we would be looking to have 12 paras over the 2 classrooms. So almost one-to-one, but not completely one-to-one.
Right. And if a student enters that program, we would have to go back to getting the 3 main teachers?
No, I believe that we would be able to do so with the 2 teachers. If there was a huge spike in the enrollment, we would have to fund that through the 240 federal grant. So a lot of times, if we see a need for an additional para mid-year that's not in the budget, we fund it out of the grant, and then we'll bring it into the next fiscal year's budget. So if we needed to fund something out of the grant, we could do that. So right now, what we're anticipating for next year is that there's only a need for 2 choices teachers at the West Elementary next year.
So I guess my concern is just looking at the program and the history of it and the potential of the difficulty of the program. I would ask for your consideration when you go back and we meet again to consider keeping all 3 teachers. One is, I'm concerned, just like you said, we had the 3 and 2 were working because of different reasons. The potential of that program to increase its numbers and us not have the proper staff that's familiar with that program, to give it another look, if you could, and maybe we can come back and discuss it, along with that list. I have a concern because of the population of students that attend that program, that lessening the FTEs of the professional people that run that program might damage the
Absolutely,
process.
and I think coming with the accurate student numbers is important too. So I'll come to you with everything tomorrow, and we'll take a deep look at this and see what's necessary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Mr. Amico.
Thank you, through the chair. And I also, I agree with Ms. Carpenter on that particular classroom, those 3 classrooms. Part of our city is transient. We do have some students moving in and out. With that could be a possibility of some students that do require those services, and we do have is it pre-K and 1, or it's just K to 1?
For this, right now, there are 3 classrooms, K to 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5. So what we'd be looking at is more of like a 1 to 3 and a 3 to 5, depending on the need of the students.
Okay.
And it's just strictly based on enrollment.
Okay, Like I said, through the chair, I would agree with Ms. Carpenter on that, if we could keep that. So we're on our wish list, our wants. Can I do that? Okay. So I have a long list, and some of them are more important than others. Again, I'm basing my list, my need, on safety, but they all kind of mesh together. Something, I want to bring up two things that I brought up last year. They're probably not going to happen this year, but I do want to mention why I think these two positions can be a big help to our whole organization. The first thing is we have a very, very successful athletic program, and I really respect what we're doing down there in our athletics and the people who run it. A lot of schools, a lot of organizations have an assistant director of athletics, and I think that's a wish list down the road. I don't think that's going to happen this time around, but I did bring it up last year. When I looked at my notes from last year, I just feel that with everything that's going on with, Title IX and athletics are a different animal than they were when we were participating, even 10, 20, 30 years ago. So I really think down the road there is a need for an assistant in that position, and go from there. The other position that I really think that we're missing out on, and we see this in private schools, we see this in colleges, is a director of alumni at the high school. We're looking at enrollment, we're looking at a loss of enrollment. We spoke about per pupil expenditures earlier on, probably $17,000, $18,000. The recruiting aspect. I know we do a pretty good job of recruiting kids at the Higgins, but we could be better. And not only on that end, but on the alumni end, we also have, over the last 40 years, if you average, 300 graduates per, what's that, 12,000, 13,000 graduates? Do we know if we're in contact with all 13,000 or 14,000 graduates over the last 20, 30 years? Private schools do it, right up the road. We know colleges and universities do it. Maybe it's time that we start looking at a director of alumni for the high school. We have a lot of people, we've seen some grants and monies come in from out of state in the past. Maybe we have someone down the road who reaches out to people who have moved out of state, or even in-state, or even in the city, who have lost touch with the schools. So that's something I'd like to see down the road, and I'll probably revisit that next year, unless someone wants to make a motion to bring that in now. The other thing on safety is kids have to be safe, they have to be secure, they have to be stable in order to be successful. If you don't have that, take it from me, I've been teaching for 23 years. If that kid in front of you has something else going on, he's not learning. You could be doing, you can be jumping up and down, you can be, doing whatever, throwing tricks at them. If they're not safe and secure because they have mental health problems, they're not learning. So my whole thing is guidance. We need more guidance. We need more adjustment counselors. So I would ask through the chair to Dr. Vidal to look at that. On the safety end, full-time security, whatever we have now, we need to add to it, as far as I'm concerned. You can't have enough security. I guess, budget-wise you can, but as a parent, as a teacher, as a school committee member, give me more adults in the building that can observe and keep an eye on kids. Full-time paras, of course, and this is something through the city that was spoken about at our safety meeting. We had Chief Griffin here, and he said that we would be replacing our retiring SRO, but he also mentioned that there might be others who are interested in it because it's a great position. I mean, you get to, as a police officer, you get to build relationships with students and really see them mature over the years. So I would recommend to this committee that we hire a 5th SRO. So not only replace the retiring one, but also, and I'll wait till Ms. Dunn is.
So, Mr. Miko, I appreciate that. Just Just to, in the interest of time, and I know we're under a crunch, and I want to make sure that we do this. The SRO is a very clear recommendation to me. You want a 5th SRO. Security, I know we added those 2 positions. Is that sufficient in your eyes, or I just want to quantify, you mentioned guidance, SAC, and this, is there a number, is there a location, just to be as accurate as we
Sure.
can so we can move forward?
Thank you for
I just
asking.
want to try to figure out exactly what we're looking for.
You know, before tonight, I was coming in thinking, I want to make sure we have an adjustment counselor in every building, at least. That includes all the elementary schools, and then move on from there. I just think there's such a need. This afternoon, I was on School Spring and just checking School Spring as I do often, and one after another, school psychologists right down the row. I mean, there were probably like 30 positions that were open. And there's a reason why all these districts are trying to help, trying to get people on their side to help kids, because the need is so intense. 23 years ago, when I started teaching, you had at-risk kids. You had a few kids that were at risk. I can guarantee you that every kid in this school system is at risk. Every kid in every school system is at risk. So whatever you can do, whatever we can do as a group to bring specialists in front of our students, to guide them, to talk to them, to give them support, is worth every single money, not only now, but 5 years down the road when those 12-year-olds are 17 and when those 17-year-olds are 22. Every penny will be worth its while in this case. I guess that's all I have, but thank you. I'll yield.
So if it'll be helpful, tomorrow, what I'll bring, just so that we can, help to quantify this, I'll bring by location all the building access attendants we have in the district, guidance counselors, SACs, BCBAs, school psychologists, just so that we have a clear picture of all of the services that we have, and then if there's any additional recommendation for additions, we'll be able to make an accurate
appreciate
recommendation.
that. And through the chair, and this isn't only a Peabody thing. This is a North Shore thing, a Massachusetts. We're a microcosm of this country, and so I would rather be on the more prepared than ever. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miko. Mr. Hockman?
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on that, on some of Mr. Amico's points and some of Dr. Vidala's questions, and I'll present my list after other committee members have their opportunity. In addition to providing us with, through the chair to Dr. Vidala, in addition to providing us what the current landscape looks like regarding those positions, can you just give us an average cost for each of those positions so that if we wanted to add, we have an idea what that expenditure would look like?
Just as a response, a new teacher, we slot at $66,950. That's $65,000 for the previous year plus a 3%. Some of these, and I defer to Josh, and when we debrief first thing tomorrow morning, if not tonight, something like an assistant athletic director, trying to think where that's, slots, if that's something we even consider, for this coming cycle, F24, wouldn't be a Unit B, is it a Unit A, is it a non-unit? Those kind of things will drive costing.
Thank you, Mr. Rippon. Mr. Hockman, you still have the floor.
Yeah, if no one else is ready, I'll jump in. Bev, it's done. Did you have some information for us that you might want to share? It looked like you did.
Yes,
If I may, through the mayor.
Thank you. I did find the answer. This is on the Attorney General's website. If a public body holds a properly noticed meeting and decides to continue the meeting until a future date, is the public body required to post another meeting notice? Yes, the public body must treat the meeting as though it is a new meeting for the purposes of notice posting. Public body must post the meeting 48 hours in advance and post a new meeting notice. So,
So you take continue to mean the same as recessed?
yeah, I believe so, yeah.
So do I still have the floor, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, you do.
Thank you. So on that point, and Ms. Dunn, thank you for that quick and thorough research on this subject. I guess that leaves us with, as far as I see it, and I usually don't see most things clearly. So I see we have two options. Either we're meeting on Friday, because I don't want to meet on Saturday or Sunday or Monday, or we currently have the public meeting scheduled for May 30th, which gets the budget through what I think I read before the city council, out of committee, but actually in front of the city council on June 18. And we're not required to actually have the budget completed until June 30. Through that process, through the city council, the taxing and spending authority voting on it until June 30. So the way I see it is either we meet Friday and hopefully we wrap things up Friday, or we respectfully ask for that public meeting to be pushed back perhaps a week and give us some time next week to reconvene and do this work. And there may be other options that I'm not seeing, so I just kind of wanted to direct the conversation there now before we finish up, so we have an idea what the where the goalposts move.
Yeah, not easy questions, and to kind of do this on the fly. I believe we have to keep our May 30th date for the public hearing to meet the council timeline. So, yeah, I mean, I know on Friday we have the Simon Youth Academy's graduation. Yeah, that's at 11.
11?
So I don't know if we can meet after that in the afternoon. Oh, you wouldn't be, yeah, maybe 3 o'clock?
So, I believe the mayor is suggesting that we meet at 3 on Friday, which is, I think all the administrators just smiled as they're here. Is that feasible?
I mean, that's the earliest I think we could meet under the law that was outlined by Mrs. Dunn, I think, in terms of scheduling.
Oh, yeah, we could meet Friday night. I would request 4 o'clock, because we all know about Lowell Street traffic. Just throwing that out there.
I could do 3:30 at the
So,
earliest.
Mr. Mayor, I think Mr. Swanson just did what I love. He split the baby between what Ms. Dunn is suggesting and what you're suggesting, 3:30 on Friday. It seems like we can all make that. And I implore everybody that we're here. We're here for the duration, because that's it. We can post for Saturday and Sunday if you'd like, because if we're going to do that, we need to post it. But none of us want to be here Saturday or Sunday, I don't think. So we're going to need the information, hopefully as quickly as possible before the meeting, and then be prepared to make some quick I don't want to rush anything, but we're going to need to make motions and vote on things, and I don't know that we're going to have an hour and a half to discuss each motion. So with that, I think I still have the floor, and I'm going to go through my wish list now, if that's okay, Mr. Mayor.
May I ask, before you resume?
Yeah.
There is an expert on posting sitting with us, Mrs. Macarelli. What is the earliest tomorrow that the meeting could be posted publicly? I don't want to put you on the spot, but your advice would be perfect for us.
9 o'clock tomorrow morning?
Right.
Yeah.
And that gives us Friday afternoon is fine. Yeah. Okay, there we go.
The latest we could do it is 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon for 3 o'clock Friday.
Right, so we'll be covered. That's the first thing I know, Ms. Macarelli, that's the first thing she's going to do in the morning. We're okay on Friday.
The other option that we could do would be to meet on Tuesday, as early as possible, where we all could be there, and then just have the public hearing thereafter. You know, if we were to meet at 4, and then just work on that. I mean, I would think we could work through this for 3 hours and then have the public hearing at 7.
But I'd be okay with that if we take the votes tonight. And that's what I was saying about the way in which we're operating. If we're not gonna meet before the day of the public meeting, I want the votes tonight and then backtrack on Tuesday if that's what we have to do, rather than give a wish list and say, we're gonna hammer it out and then be prepared for a public meeting at 7 o'clock.
Let's get everything on the table, and then we'll go through, we'll prioritize, we'll try to put numbers to the best as we can, and then if people want to vote on, you know, what the order is, you know, let's get everything out as fast as we can.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I can suggest, let's post Friday. Let's post for Friday, and if we use it, we use it. I'd like to use it, I guess, at this point. Maybe we can put a curfew on ourselves at 6 o'clock so that we can get to our weekends. If we all seem to be available, it's not convenient and it's not pleasant, but it's where we are. And then use your Tuesday afternoon as a final backup.
How about Thursday night at 9 o'clock?
If we can get that posted tonight, yeah.
Well, it's right now, it's Tuesday, no, it's 9 o'clock. We couldn't do it now?
I think we have to get it in public buildings and things like that. We actually have to, yeah.
All right, well, that leaves us 2 options, so it's either Friday at 3:30 or Tuesday at 3:30. I'm gonna open that up and everybody give their opinion, please, right now. Mr. Swanson?
Honestly, I don't like Friday, but I think it's the better for both us and the public, honestly. I think it gives us time, gives the administration time to prepare everything for Tuesday. But that's my opinion. I'll go with the will of the committee, but we have Monday and Friday and Tuesday.
Anybody else have firm thoughts on this right now? Mrs. Dunn?
I think we should schedule a meeting for Friday. I think we should work tonight as long as we're able. Under our own rules, we can work till 11. Years ago, that was up till 2 in the morning, just suggesting. But if we keep it on Friday, we can start at the time definite as posted. We can end the meeting at whatever time we think. And then we should also post a meeting for Tuesday in case we need it. And that way, we would be covered, we would be able to proceed. And I think that would be the most prudent course, to set those 2 meetings tonight, post them. If we don't need them, then we can cancel them. It's a lot easier to cancel than to post again.
I think that's absolutely the correct decision. So, Marge, would you be able to post then 2 meetings? Friday at 3:30 and Tuesday at 3:30?
Yes, Mayor.
Yep, I think that's a good suggestion. Okay. All right, so let's keep working then. With that plan in place, let's get back to, I think, Mr. Hockman, you had the floor. Let's continue that discussion about items that you want further review of.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, in addition to the maintenance, which we've beaten, I'm going to throw out the big-ticket items. No, seriously. So there's some smaller things that I'm looking for. I'd like to see, and we've talked about this, the golf program reinstated here at the Higgins, and it funded in a line, however that looks like a stipend or whatever that looks like. What the expectation on the cost of that would be, perhaps an expectation on whether that would include a user fee. Sometimes user fees at the middle school for athletics look different than user fees at the high school. I don't know that it's, I'll put this in the line of some of Mr. Amico's wishes, like alumni director and things like that, but I'd like to, I'd certainly like to, and I know we're going to pilot the gardening program at the South School this year, but I'd like to kind of maybe flesh out what that cost looks like moving forward. And I'd also like to flesh out what it would look like bring the custodians back into our budget. And I don't have an expectation that that's going to be something that we incorporate or adopt in the 23-24 version of the budget. But I'd like to at least get a starting point so that we can put it in a subcommittee and have conversations about it going through the fall, maybe early winter, and come out as the budget's being developed with a understanding as to whether or not it's feasible and realistic, or if it's something that we have to move on from, or something along those lines. And that's, items that I identified particularly at the last meeting. It's not an indictment on any one individual or any group of people. Our custodians are short-staffed. Jim Hafey's way overworked. There's a lot of people doing a lot of good things. We just have we've seen some backlog in work orders that are, I think are primarily due to lack of personnel and lack of ability to get some stuff done because of not enough man hours. But there are also some other things that are happening where I think we need to I'd like to see the custodians brought back on our side to give our side a little more opportunity to have direct communication with some of the personnel so that we can get perhaps some stuff done that might not be getting done. So I'd like to see something that looks like that. I do like some of the thoughts that my colleagues have brought up. I am concerned about the programs over at the West as well, and the teachers. It seems like a program that has a significant opportunity for teachers being injured perhaps and losing time. So I would be concerned if we were knocked down to one staff member if that were the case, but we'll see what that looks like. I also do think that Mr. Amico was on with the assistant athletic director. That's a tough job. That's a burnout job. Coach DeRocha is doing a fantastic job, and he's everywhere all the time, and I worry about a burnout there. We did have an assistant special education director, which is not in the budget this year, another burnout job that I worry about. But what I would like to leave you with, Dr. Vidala, is whatever suggestions. It's never good to say a recommendation for a reduction because none of us want to reduce anything. We just want to make sure or see if we can put a little stamp of our own on the budget and the school, how schools function. But if I can ask you to somehow bring forward these items that we're seeking and identifying areas where we might be able to retract a little bit, which is what we're asking of you and your team, that I prefer not to see those retractions come out of classrooms. So I don't want to see, I prefer not to see a reduction in reading or math specialists or tutors. I think Mr. Amico has been abundantly clear about mental health, as a lot of members in the committee have. So that would be an area that I hope we wouldn't see a proposal for reduction. Certainly teachers, I wouldn't want to see a proposal for a reduction there unless somehow we can consolidate classes and keep the class size, not just at contractual rates, but at preferred rates. We work hard at that in this district, and you do too. Your administrative team does too. You identify where there's need to add teachers when we have class sizes that are approaching limits. So that's stuff that I'd like to see maintained and continued. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm carving out some areas where I don't want you to see bring back to us for potential reductions, and that's going to further hamstring you, and it's not intended, but that's where we are, okay? So I think that that's my list. It's really the maintenance that's my big ticket item that I'd like to see.
Thank you, Mr. Huckman. Any other comments or questions this time? Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I would like to say that I agree with the thoughts that Ms. Carpenter and Mr. Miko had about that Choices program, and I'd really like us to take a look at that. I know, we have programs with co-teaching and different models, and I'll be honest, my fear is that we never know how quickly a program could need to open another classroom. And I just want to make sure that everything is assured for that. I think when we look at our special ed department, so many of those programs are for students who need assistance in many different ways, but a lot of it is that social emotional assistance that's so vital to students, and if it works and lets them get back into regular classes and keeps them from becoming out-of-district students and spending the additional funds to send students to, a private school or a consortium, something like that, I'd really like to have you take a look at that and see if we can still maintain that program as it is, with the thought that, it may need to, let me back it up, that we may have additional students going into that. I know with special ed programs, they're very, they expand, they contract, they expand, they contract, but I think that one has helped a lot of people in the past.
Absolutely, and we are identifying students better now, and we're really getting to know them. So, for
Yeah.
example, we're adding a classroom at the Brown School for our ASD population, right? So, I think some of the populations we're identifying earlier and better, and in other areas, additional mental health professionals and school adjustment counselors at the elementary level is probably supporting our K and 1 students a little bit better than in years past, and maybe not requiring that assistance until 2nd, 3rd grade. So,
Right.
but I'll bring all that information to the next
Good,
meeting.
thank you. There's another one that really, it just came to my attention fairly recently. Regarding the JROTC program, it's a wonderful program. It's such a great leadership course for so many students. And one of the things that I would like to request is if we could look in the budget to find the money to provide a stipend for the instructor that runs the Raiders competition team. It's a team, they compete all year round. If they're different than an athletic team that has a season. They pretty much go all through the year. But they don't have a stipend there. And if you notice, the JROTC is always, providing the color guard at various ceremonies throughout the city, at the football games, and maybe at other games too as well. Those are all things that they do for the community. And I do think if we could look into the budget and check and see, I know somewhere in there's a stipend for color guard, but I believe that's for the band. And the band hasn't had a color guard in many years. I also just want to put in a plug for the JROTC. I'd really like to see us do that to make sure that that program continues. I would hate to see us lose it. It's been on probation before. The numbers have to be up to 100. And so we want to really encourage and make it possible for that program to flourish. So I'd really like to see us do anything possible to make sure that that's maintained. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Any other comments? Mr. Olympio?
Yeah, through the chair. I agree, in the interest of time, Ms. Carpenter, Mr. Amico, Ms. Dunn, everybody here, paras are a high priority, safety's a high priority, so I don't need to regurgitate everything like that. But also, too, I know you've looked at, Dr. Vidal, the budget 12 different times, but again, I do think in my experience, revisiting some of those line items that we talked about, taking 10, taking 20,000 here and there, might alleviate some of the stress. I mean, just the thing, I look at Medicare expense. I take a look at the total salaries for the district. I multiply it by 1.45%, the Medicare rate. And again, not a big deal, but the amount was about 10 grand too high on the line item. So just little things like that, you know, it adds up, $30,000, $40,000 that could pay for another pair or something like that. So I would just really focus, again, looking at the line items, and I think in the past we've used the word, we can maybe take a little bit of a risk on certain line items. So, you know, I don't know if there's any opportunity in some of the utilities, things like that. I mean, those are some of the things that we've grabbed at in the past. So I appreciate all your hard work and your team as well, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olympio. Mr. Swanson, then Mr. Hockman.
Thank you. Through you to the committee, I appreciate all you've put forward, and I think obviously the maintenance budget is very important to us. I also, Ms. Carpenter, I really appreciate you bringing forward and having the conversations with Dr. Vidal around the paras. I very much in alignment with your thought in that stability for those students as they're in there, so thank you very much for that. And then my last, I am repeating a lot what's said, but I would ask Dr. Vidal to look at the line items. One that I did have on my list, but Ms. Dunn did highlight, was some of the stipends. What are there? What are they used for now? How have we spent them in the past? Can we move some of that around for some things like GRTC? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Mr. Hockman.
Yeah, thank you. For Friday also, can you Dr. Vidal or Mr. Rippon, can you flesh out what incremental increases in fees look like in real dollars based upon actual usage or current usage, projected usage, so that we have an idea what that would look like in terms of what we can expect as an increase in revenue. To Ms. Dunn's point earlier about facility usage, same thing. You know, I don't know, you know, when we started renting out the Higgins, I don't think we did it initially when we opened the building, but it's been at least 5 years, and might be time for review. I don't know, and sometimes I'm told that my tone somehow offends people, and I'm not intending to do that, and I don't always, but I apologize. I'll apologize in advance. I know that Ms. Dunn also mentioned that she and I sat on a turf field committee where we established some user fees for the football field when we got the new turf, and there are tiers, you know, as Ms. Dunn said, based upon the type of usage for the field, and I don't want to. This is where my tone may become wrong or misinterpreted. I don't know that we realize any of those funds, right? I think the Parks and Rec, with our collaboration, set the fee, at least for the football field. Now, I understand baseball field at the height, and I'm talking about fields within our campuses. I know, I do know that the Parks and Rec department or outside vendors who are engaged through Parks and Rec do perform work at the baseball field in terms of cutting grass and lining, you know, the putting chalk on the lines and batter boxes and things like that. And if that's part of the offset, is that the user fees that are generated for baseball offset those costs, and that's one thing. I don't know, and I don't know that they do or don't, Parks and Rec people or vendors outside of the school department do work at the football field. It's my understanding that the maintenance on the football field is within our athletic department budget, and I could be wrong about that. I'm wrong about most things, admittedly, and but I don't think that we realize the rental revenue generated from the turf field, and it was being used for soccer. I remember that being talked about during those meetings, Ms. Dunn, where soccer was a big draw. People were looking to men's leagues for soccer or club teams for soccer were looking to rent the turf field at the high school. So I don't know the answer to that question, but if we can get an answer to that question and then maybe have a conversation. And I don't know that a conversation is going to change the practice, but I guess I just kind of like to know maybe, and I'm trying to tiptoe and step as lightly as I can on this and have a soft tone. It's something I'm told I'm working on. in any event, if we can just have some of those so that we can see what other sources of revenue we can add, as opposed to only looking at things that we're going to perhaps reduce. It's always nice to be able to add some revenue, even if it is, I think, as Mr. Olympio said, taking some risks, with some of those expectations, and maybe we don't achieve them, but let's at least look at them, please.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we're trying to find every penny in the budget that we might be able to use on some of the items that we're talking about. And one way that I would like to see us really look at is if we have grants that would cover certain things, then that money that's currently in the budget could be utilized in other areas. What we were given tonight was a list of grants, but can we please have a list of the competitive grants that we've received in the past, just to see how much of that money comes in, and perhaps be able to make an estimate going forward on increasing those competitive grants so that they would be able to then offset some of these lines in the budget and be able to put more initiatives into it that the members are asking for, so that you don't have to cut anything, but we would be able to add. It's something I think we should look at.
Yep, absolutely. We can get some of those. A lot of the competitive grants, because they're not guaranteed, we don't put salaries in. They're more for supplies and professional development, things like that, because they're not guaranteed. But I know that Dr. Kelly has been working to compile that information, so we'll get all that in what we spend those funds on.
That'd be good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. All right, any other comments, Mr. Swanson?
Sorry, I forgot my last. Through to Dr. Vidal, I was actually going to ask right before Ms. Dunn, we have things like the Rappaport grant that is out there, the fund that we have. Can any of that offset and help us with the budgets? Can that go towards the performing arts and maybe move some of their budget? And I don't, obviously my new favorite thing, but I don't want to take money away from it, but can we be creative with what we have for Rappaport and move some of that money to where it should be more beneficial? And
so a lot of the grants that we have, that we get, especially the entitlement grants, we do have an obligation that they must support the budget. They can't supplant. So we can't take something out and put it into a grant if it's a federal grant. So there's certain items on that. The Rappaport funds are really to enhance the program. So next year we do anticipate, with the revenue that we have, being able to spend around $20,000 on performing arts. That would be above and beyond what we've budgeted, and I know that Mr. Simmons is very tight with his budget and only puts things in that he absolutely needs, and so all of the money that's in the appropriated budget, he has allocated, and this would be for something above and beyond. And there are some stipulations around that. We are excited to do that, but I do worry about taking something out of the budget and using those grant funds that are supposed to supplement the budget to replace some of the things that we're doing. So I want to make sure that we continue to enhance the program through that. But I do think that from what some of the other members said, there are some items that we can find, some grants, some items where, 10,000 here, things like that does really add up when you're doing that, and that, can hopefully add to some of these things. So we'll take a deep dive into this. And I do think that it's important for us to, we might not be meeting as a whole, but we should be working, right? We should be doing work, we'll be sending information out, and let's, make sure that we're compiling information, and that whatever it is that you need, I'll get you as soon as I can in the morning, and, we'll have that by end of day tomorrow, so that way the committee can be working on things and we can be as efficient as possible.
Thank you very much for that. And I appreciate your detail on that, of why you can't, and having that understanding, not just moving money around. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you. And in the same vein as bringing some money in, I would just like to add that in regards to the revenue, the expenses, those type of things, I do agree that we could and probably should raise the integrated preschool role model rate. We haven't had an increase in that preschool in quite some time, and they are quite below the average, and I think that might help a little bit, along with the facility usage. However, I would not be in favor of raising any other fees regarding transportation or athletic fees, but, you know, I'm one member, but if you wanted to look at the integrated preschool and the facility usage, I definitely would be in favor of that.
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Mr. Hockman?
Yeah, Ms. Carpenter, I think we can just take care of that right now. I'll make a motion to increase the integrated preschool rates to the recommendation of the administration.
Second.
Okay, you've heard the motion by Mr. Hockman, seconded by Mrs. Carpenter. Any comments? Roll call vote, Mrs. Dunn.
Oops, sorry, just one question. Are the parents allowed to pay in installments on that?
They pay in thirds currently, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Miko?
Thank you. Through the chair to Ms. Carpenter, where are these rates in line with everything else? I know you're the expert in this.
They're quite lower than the average. And again, this is for the role model children, so the integrated preschool children do not pay. And there's also scholarships and children who provide, you know, who are on government assistance are not expected to pay those increases.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you both. Mrs. Dunn?
Sorry, it raised another question. If we raise the cost of the fee for the model students, does that allow you to raise the fee on the special education reimbursement for the special education students? How does that work?
It was my understanding that that preschool is for special education students, and once those seats are filled, if there's any extra, that's where we bring in the model students, the role model students. I didn't think there was anything together
So
with that.
we don't take any tuition, we don't get any reimbursement. We do have
Oh, I
grant
understand.
funding for that program, but we have an obligation to provide those services for 3- and 4-year-olds. And so because it's integrated, we have, so if it's a class of 15, we have 7 seats for special ed students and then 8 seats for role models. And we only charge for the 8 students. So that just offsets the overall cost of the program, but we are obligated to fund that through district funds for the 3- and 4-year-olds with special needs.
No, absolutely, I understand that. My question is, are you allowed, we receive federal and state funds for our students under Chapter 70. Does that extend to pre-K, or does it stop with kindergarten?
Yes, it does extend to pre-K.
Oh,
So
okay.
the students that we claim from that are incorporated.
Very good.
And so we do receive Chapter 70 funds through that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Swanson?
Sorry, for clarification through you to, Mr. Hockman made the motion. That's for the $7 per hour rate that was recommended by the administration?
Yeah, I think it was
Correct.
3,000 for part-time and
7,000 for full-time.
7,000 for full-time, and how much for part-time?
3.
3,000, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Roll call vote on the motion, please.
Mr. Swanson?
Yes.
Mr. Olympio?
Yes.
Mr. Hockman?
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn?
Yes.
Terrific, thank you. So, Mr. Hockman, did you have the floor, or Mrs. Carpenter? I couldn't quite remember.
We
but
share the floor these days.
You guys,
The utility fee, I think that we can, I think that the utility fee that we currently charge is $50, and we don't waive that, and I think, the energy fee, I'm sorry. Yeah, so I'm going to throw this off by way of discussion, and we haven't raised that in, I don't think since I've been on the committee.
Nope.
It's been a
always
long
been
time.
50.
Can I throw out the proposal of increasing that to $100? Is that reasonable, or is that too much? It can be.
let's take it as a motion.
So I make a motion that we increase the utility fee to $100. Is it per event or per use, or however we quantify it? So
Okay.
moved.
Second.
You've heard the motion by Mr. Hockman, seconded by Mr. Miko. Thank you. Discussion? Mr.
Yeah,
Hockman?
I just want to make, non-waivable. It stays non-waivable. That's what the current fee is.
Yep. Mrs. Dunn?
I definitely have to agree with you about keeping it non-waivable, but I do think $100 is too much. We came up with the $50 fee based on the energy costs that year, and I honestly can't remember what year it was, and I know we could probably figure out how much energy has gone up since that time, but I just think $100 is too much. Would you be amenable to $60 per use?
Not that I want to buy a used car here, but I'd be amenable to 75. $10 is, I think, a little short on this. I think it's,
Okay,
yeah, thank you.
let's make a deal. Okay, I'll say 75, but if we're able to figure this out, that we can still bring it back during our budget hearings, if we could perhaps we could get some information from the electric light department on what the actual energy costs are, or maybe Mr. Rippon would be able to, God bless you, you're going to have a lot of work, calculate how much energy costs have gone up since we put that fee in. And I honestly don't remember what year, but it's been a long time.
Ms. Maccarelli, I think, has come up with 2012. So,
You can look in the minutes. Oh, thank you.
Guarantee in
the
11
magic
years,
program.
it's probably gone up at least 50%. So I think
I would
that's
say
a
at
No,
safe
no, this is
bet.
Peabody, we have the lowest rates around.
Yeah.
I'll amend the motion to $75. Mr. Miko still seconds it.
Okay. Motion made. You've all heard the motion. Roll call vote?
Mr. Swanson?
Yes.
Mr. Olympio?
Yes.
Mr. Hockman?
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn?
I'm going to say no, only pending any additional information. Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Hockman, you still have the floor?
Yeah, and I've completely lost my train of thought now that I was going to, boy, oh boy.
Any other comments, questions at this point? Any items?
If we happen to think of something at like 2 or 3 in the morning, is it okay to send you an email, Dr. Vidala?
To Dr. Vidal.
It always is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Hockman, I'll come back to you.
That train came back to the station. If I can, by way of offering, how I'd like to see this, and please only take it as a suggestion that you're going to do what you do, and I don't want to usurp any of your authority or process or anything like that. Whatever we're going to look at isn't going to be pleasant, right? So if you can make columns, I'm unhappy about this reduction, but I can live with it. I'm really unhappy about this reduction, and it's going to hurt because this is a reduction that I really don't recommend, and this is a doomsday recommendation. You know, just so we kind of have a feel for, you know, in terms of if we're looking at reductions. I mean, we obviously respect you and your opinions on this, you know, and we're not looking to, that doesn't change just because we're putting a little different flavor on this. So, but your opinions as far as what we're moving around certainly matter. And if you can identify it in some fashion like that, so I know, I don't want to jump to a doomsday cut or reduction if, you know, that's really going to be something that you think is detrimental to the district somehow, when we can take, boy, this is going to hurt, but I can live with it type cut.
It's all going to hurt. But if I may, if we can have a little bit of clarity on what we're prioritizing. So if I can just roll down off the top of my head where we're at with the 10 things that we've discussed. And if I'm missing it, you know, please clarify. But if I can go through this at least and give sort of an idea of where I am right now. So the maintenance fee of $400,000, I think we're all clear on what that is. The paraprofessionals, I think if I put some changes in, I think I can make that budget neutral. The West School, we'll get the numbers and we'll talk about that. Off the top of my head, one thing that we can do to make it budget neutral is to say, start with the recommendation of starting the year with 2 teachers, and if there's an increase, we put it into the grant, and then we bring it back to the budget next year. That's one possibility, but I want to get the numbers before I commit to that. Are we considering assistant director of athletics and director of alumni? Are we costing those out? Those are sort of, are they future things? You know, this is just off the top of my head, and I'll go through all of them, and then we can kind of talk about that. Those 2 I want clarity on. I have a charge to bring forth the numbers of all of the mental health professionals, SACs, SROs, things like that, building access attendants. I will bring that forth, and if there's, I'll bring forth what a cost would be if we were looking to add any of that. The golf program is short money. I can look at what a stipend is and bring that number very easily. The gardening program, we did increase the number of stipends already. It's a question of, do we want to increase more? But again, that's not a huge thing to do. We can cost out the cost of pricing the maintenance. JROTC, I do see a stipend in there for $1,700. So either an additional stipend to match that or a slight increase to what that is, again, isn't a huge budget breaker. I think the big drivers right now are obviously maintenance. If we add any additional personnel in terms of guidance, SACs, things like that, those would be costs on top of the $400,000, and then the question around assistant director of athletics and alumni are sort of the big questions that I have moving forward. Just in terms of what the priorities are.
I think that's a pretty good summary. The only other item, which is, a number we can come up, is a 5th SRO from the police department. What's that?
I think that's funded through the city, not us.
Yep. So, no, but I wanted to keep that in play. Okay, I think that's a pretty good summary, Dr. Badala. Okay, any other comments or questions? All right, well, if we're ready to break, then I want to just review the schedule. We're going to meet Friday, 3:30, here at the Higgins for the next budget meeting. Also going to post Tuesday, 3:30, also here at the Higgins Middle School, if needed. And we have the public meeting. What time is the public meeting? 6:30. So let's keep 3:30 for a budget review, with 6:30 being the public meeting, okay? We'll work on getting these items and information over. Tomorrow night is the George Peabody Medal Ceremony over at the Peabody Institute Library at 6 p.m., honoring our top 8 students, a long-time tradition that the Peabody Institute Library does, which is a wonderful program. And I know next week it's going to be a very busy week for us, for the school district as a whole. So I wanted to mention those couple things. Before we break, a couple of items.
I don't want to jump in front of anybody, but I just would like to offer, I know we can't meet as a whole, but we can certainly meet individually. So I can put all this forward, and I can, at least schedule individual time with people to review some of your questions and things like that. We want to, again, make sure that you don't feel rushed at the meetings moving forward. So I'll take a pass at all of this with Mr. Rippon and Dr. Higgins and Dr. Chase with the team. We'll put that together, and, I know we can't meet as a whole, but we can meet individually. So we can certainly sit down with some of those things and try to hash out things so that when we do get together as a whole, we feel like we've had more time to discuss as well.
Dr. Badala. A couple of hands on Mr. Swanson, and I'll go to Mr. Hockman.
Sorry, just one other, obviously, this is going to be extremely busy next week and a half. Thursday night is Student Achievement Awards at the high school as well.
Thank you. That's 6 p.m. also, I believe, that evening. Thank you for bringing that up. That's an important night. Mr. Hockman.
Yeah, just to be really prudent, can we post for Saturday morning too? Because if things blow up Friday, and I don't expect them to, we're not going to have an option to, can we post for like 8 or 9 a.m. Saturday morning. Not that I want to see anybody, but just in case. We can cancel.
I don't see any problem with doing that.
I agree. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, just to be,
Yeah.
okay. Mr.
Motion
Dunn.
to recess.
Yeah, I was just going to say a motion to recess until Friday.
Good work. We have a lot more work ahead of us, but I thought we really focused on a number of important items, so thank you for your hard work.